My name is Field Rose. Well, that's what they call me here. I'm actually Chin Hao, a guy from Earth who woke up 3 days ago in this fantasy world, stuck in the body of a nobleman's son. Sounds great, right? Not really. My father, Count Rose, just told me I'm being sent away. He dressed it up with fancy words about me being a grown lion ready to make his mark, but everyone in the room knew the truth. He was kicking me out. See, the original Field was too kind for his own good. He gave his combat awakening potion to his younger brother and let his sister take his spot at the Mage Academy. He was nice to everyone, even the servants. But in a noble family, being kind just makes you look weak. So they all treated him like trash. My stepmother is the one really running things. She's got my father wrapped around her finger. The man looks half dead, pale, and exhausted. She announced, with a smug look on her face, that my new territory would be Nightfall Domain in the far north. The north is basically a death zone. 10 years ago, the Empire used some kind of corrupting fog to wipe out 300,000 beastmen there. Now everything, people, animals, all of it, has turned into corrupted monsters. The Empire tried to take it back 3 times and lost every single army they sent. Nobody goes there, not even runaway criminals. They were giving me a land that exists only on paper. I asked my father for some support, but my stepmother shut that down fast. All I got was 500 gold coins and permission to bring my personal servants. That's nothing for building up a territory. Then my half-brother came over to rub it in. He mocked my black hair and dark eyes, features I got from my mother, a foreign maid who was sold to the castle as a slave. That's the other reason everyone looks down on me here. But then he leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. There was a girl the original Field loved, a girl with flaxen hair. She was found dead in an alley behind a tavern. My brother told me, with a sick grin, that he was the one who did it. He even called it thrilling. That was what killed the original Field. The grief and rage made him so ill he died, and that's when I took over his body. I felt disgusted to my core. But I kept one thought close. I have a cheat, a system with a map and a moving marker on it. They can send me to a cursed wasteland all they want. I'll find a way to make it work. My brother stood there with a twisted grin, saying he wanted to enjoy my reaction before I left for the cursed lands forever. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms and asked him why he was doing this to me. I'd never done anything to hurt him. His answer? He blamed me for the combat potion I gave him years ago. He said he couldn't break through to become a first-rank knight, and everyone called him useless behind his back. He was convinced I'd poisoned the potion. The truth is, his talent was just terrible, but he didn't care about the truth. Then he said something even worse, that if I ever found someone I loved, he'd have her kidnapped and tortured. That was it. I snapped. I slammed my knee into his gut and sent him flying, then kicked him right in the face. Blood everywhere. Everyone around us froze. The old, obedient Field would never have done something like this. I grabbed his golden curls and was about to smash his head into the ground when suddenly a hand clamped around my throat and lifted me into the air. I couldn't breathe. A beautiful woman with wine-red hair was choking me, and on her forehead glowed a mysterious rune. She was a god-chosen, one of the most powerful beings in this world. Only women can become god-chosen, and they have abilities far beyond normal magic or combat aura. My brother already had one serving him, and I didn't even have a territory yet. She threw me into a wall instead of killing me. My brother screamed that he wanted me dead, but I wiped the blood from my mouth and walked away. I couldn't fight a god-chosen. Not yet. I swore to myself. Once I grow strong enough, I'm coming back to destroy them all. Now, about my cheat ability, there's a map only I can see, with a green dot slowly moving on it. In this world, lords can form contracts with God-chosen and gain unique talents tied to their territory. The original Field never had any talent, but when I took over his body, I got a rare innate gift. That green dot might be connected to it. I packed up quickly. My butler had collected the 500 gold coins and was waiting with the servants, looking like a man heading to his own funeral. Can't blame him. Nobody wants to go to the cursed lands. When we stepped outside, a cavalry squad in mismatched armor was waiting. Their captain, Connor, introduced himself as our escort, but the men looked more like bandits than soldiers. I figured they were really there to make sure I actually went to my death sentence. I told them we'd stop at Golden Eagle City first. I needed supplies, and more importantly, that green dot on my map was there. Golden Eagle City is the second largest city in the Rose family's territory, given to my second sister. It pulls in 600,000 gold coins a year in taxes, compared to my pathetic 500 coins total. The guards at the gate were lazy and rude to commoners, but the moment they saw our cavalry, they scrambled to clear the road and bowed to me. Being a noble still counts for something, even if you're the least loved one. I followed the green dot to the northern part of the city, and it led me straight to the slave market. The stench hit us immediately, a disgusting mix of pig feed and waste. Even Captain Connor was gagging and fanning the air in front of his face, though it didn't help at all. The slave market was awful. The smell alone made my eyes water. Those cheap merchants wouldn't even spend a single copper coin to give their slaves a bath. 5 or 6 people were crammed into tiny cages, eating, sleeping, and doing everything else right there. Some of the female slaves didn't even have rags to cover themselves, and the merchants did that on purpose to attract buyers. The moment the slave traders spotted me in my black robe and steel sword, they swarmed me like flies. Nobles are their favorite customers. We spend big and come back often. In this world, nobles treat slaves worse than their hunting dogs. I looked at the slaves in their iron cages. They were filthy, covered in whip scars, and had no light in their eyes. Whenever one accidentally made eye contact with me, they'd immediately look down and tremble. I asked about prices while searching for that green dot on my map. The merchant, a weasel-faced guy, rattled off the rates. Goblins and halflings for 10 silver, subhumans for 20 silver, beastfolk for 60 silver. He also pointed out a special item, an elf slave going for 1,000 gold coins. She was beautiful but completely broken inside, having been used by goblins and forced to bear 26 children. The things he casually described made my skin crawl. He even mentioned that some nobles buy elves just to eat their flesh, believing it has magical health benefits. This world's nobility isn't the elegant, refined kind you see in TV dramas. They're brutal feudal monsters. Then I found it. The green dot was hovering over a cage in the corner. Inside was a wolf subhuman girl with red eyes, wolf ears, and a wolf tail. She was lying still on the cold, damp floor of her cage, but her eyes kept darting toward the keys on the merchant's belt. As a proper otaku from Earth, I had zero resistance to a real-life wolf-eared girl. I reached out to pat her head like you'd pet a dog. She growled at me, her red eyes flashing dangerously. Captain Connor grabbed his sword, and my butler warned me to be careful. I pulled my hand back. She was fierce but also clearly scared. Cute and pitiful at the same time. The merchant tried to charge me 3 gold coins for her, which was a huge markup from the normal 20 silver price for subhumans. I stared him down and called out his scam. He made excuses about her being a rare catch, beautiful and untouched. I offered 50 silver and dangled the promise of future business. I'd need lots of slaves for my new territory. That got his greed going. In the end, I bought 100 human slaves and 100 subhuman slaves, 120 men total, plus the wolf-eared girl. The whole lot cost me 53 gold coins. The merchant handed me a soul contract written on sheepskin, signed in the slave's own blood. Anyone who disobeys me gets burned to ash by divine fire. He told me with a creepy smile that I could do whatever I wanted with them now. I took the contract and the rope leads. Where I'm headed, having fun, isn't really the concern, surviving the cursed lands is. I wanted to buy more slaves, but I was running low on money. Surviving in the death fog of the north requires special fog-clearing lanterns sold only by the church, and those are expensive. Plus I had over 200 people to feed. I sent my butler Chow to the merchant guild to try getting a loan. He came back looking worse than a dead rat. Nobody would lend us a single coin. The moment they heard my name, they refused. Turns out my second sister, who controls Golden Eagle City, had warned every merchant in town. Charge Field 10 times the normal price, and don't help him in any way. I was furious. Every single member of my family was working against me. And the original Field? He'd never saved a single copper coin his whole life. He donated a third of his income to the family treasury and the rest to the border fortress to fight corrupted creatures. The guy was the poorest noble alive. Fine. No loan. Their loss. I spent 180 gold coins on supplies, 17 old, weak horses, farming tools, food, and some books. The food would last about 35 days since slaves can survive on one black bread a day. I planned to buy magical equipment at the border towns, where corrupt military officers sell army supplies at a discount for pocket money. I tried hiring mercenaries at the tavern, but the moment I mentioned Nightfall Domain, every single one turned me down flat. One even told me I should just run away to another country. That night we rested at an inn. The next morning, I brought the wolf-eared girl to me. After the maids had washed her properly, she looked like a completely different person. Her tangled, filthy hair turned out to be beautiful, snow-white, and silky. With her delicate features and calm expression, she was exactly my type, a graceful, mature beauty. But her wolf ears and tail were trembling non-stop, giving away how scared she was. She could barely speak. She hadn't talked to anyone in a month. After struggling for a moment, she managed to tell me her name, Ashina. The second she said her name, the green dot above her head disappeared and was replaced by a simple status panel that only I could see. Name: Ashina. Level: Unawakened path. Wolf Cavalry God-chosen status. Malnourished, near collapse. Please provide nutrition. I almost lost it. The green dot on my map had led me to an unawakened God-chosen. And if my map could mark one, it could mark others. Every year on September 1st, the kingdom tests all eligible women for God-chosen potential, spending massive resources because they're so valuable. But my ability could find them without any of that. I started pacing around excitedly, pumping my fists. This changes everything. Maybe I actually have a real shot at surviving Nightfall Domain. Meanwhile, poor Ashina was watching me pace and punch the air, convinced I was thinking up creative ways to torture her. She'd actually been planning to fight back. Even if the slave contract killed her for it, she wanted to bite my throat out rather than die in shame. But then the maids had gently bathed her and dressed her in soft, comfortable clothes, the nicest things she'd ever worn in her life. That confused her enough to wait and see. I told her calmly that I wasn't some psycho who kills for fun. I bought her and the others to help build my territory. I leaned back in my chair, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. Then I asked if her new maid outfit fit okay. A modest, conservative dress that only showed her lower legs and hands. Nothing weird. I'd tweaked Ashina's maid outfit with some modern touches, shorter skirt, shorter sleeves. Nothing too wild, but definitely an improvement to look at. Ashina was nervous, trying to guess what I wanted from her. The maids had told her that her job was to sleep with me, but she doubted it since humans generally hate subhumans. She figured I'd see her ears and tail as disgusting. Your job is to help me build my territory. I already told you that, I said. She clearly didn't believe me, so I just sighed. Let's eat first. We'll talk over food. The moment I mentioned food, she calmed right down. She was starving. When the meal arrived, meat steaks with sauce and honey bread, I turned to talk to her, and she'd vanished. I found her sitting on the floor in the corner like a duck, waiting to be fed scraps. I grabbed her hand and pulled her to the table. She sat on the very edge of the chair, watching me carefully, waiting for me to pull out a whip. When I told her the steak was for her, she couldn't believe it. She took one tiny, cautious bite, and then something switched. She devoured 3 steaks and 5 loaves of bread until her belly was round as a ball. I watched with a satisfied grin. Eat up, girl. You're going to work hard for me later. After she finished, I told her my plan. I wanted to train her to become a God-chosen. I didn't reveal that I already knew she had the potential. I just said, train. She told me it was nearly impossible. God-chosen are extremely rare, and she'd never heard of a human forming a contract with a subhuman. The records show that even a major city like Golden Eagle City only produced 3 God-chosen in 100 years. Won't know unless we try, I said with a smile. Privately, I knew that if this didn't work out, I'd probably die in the cursed lands. Okay, she said, licking her lips. As long as there's meat. Over the next 10 days, we traveled toward the northern border. At every town we passed, I bought meat and magical health supplements for Ashina. She quickly realized I was serious about this. I also spent 150 gold coins on fog-clearing lanterns, purification potions, and awakening crystals, all essential for surviving in Nightfall Domain. Meanwhile, my situation was getting clearer in my head. My siblings didn't just dislike me, they wanted me dead. Our father was getting weaker every day, and when he dies, his massive wealth gets divided among all his children by imperial law. Every sibling I eliminate from the picture means a bigger share for the rest. That's why they sent me to a death zone. We finally reached the last fortress before the northern wasteland, Cashion Fortress, belonging to Baron Bull. It's a stone castle built into the mountains, designed to hold back the corrupted creatures from the north. Ashina was hiding in the creaky wagon, secretly praying to the wolf god to make her a god chosen. These past days felt like a dream to her, riding in a carriage, eating real meat, being served by maids. She kept touching her forehead to make sure she didn't have a fever. She still suspected I might be fattening her up for some dark ritual, but at this point she figured even being sacrificed to a demon was worth it after eating this well. My butler Chow let out a dramatic sigh about this being his last visit to Cashion Fortress. I poked him with my riding crop and asked if he'd been here often. He rolled his eyes and reminded me that the original field used to donate all his living expenses to the local villagers and to Baron Bull's personal fund, basically paying for the Baron and his soldiers to party. I cringed. Right. The original me was a saint who gave away everything. At least it means Baron Bull should welcome us warmly, and having a good relationship with the last fortress before the cursed lands could be very useful going forward. Since the original field had built up goodwill around here, I figured I might be able to cash in on that later. My butler Chow started to say something juicy about Baron Bull and his son being famous for something, but he caught himself and shut up. He'd already ruined his career once by stumbling into a noble secret. He wasn't about to make that mistake again. Then I noticed something on my map, a cluster of red skull icons, moving fast toward us. I sent a servant to get Captain Connor. He laughed it off and mocked me, saying we were behind Cashion Fortress's defensive walls, the strongest part of the Empire's defense line. He said if there was any danger here, he'd eat his horse's droppings. He also warned me not to try backing out of going to Nightfall Domain. I just said, oh, and slowed the slaves down, which put Connor and his cavalry at the front of the group. Minutes later, the welcoming party arrived. A horde of corpse creatures, gray-eyed, dressed in farmers' clothing, came charging at us, sprinting like mad. A dozen normal humans were running ahead of them, screaming for help. Even from 100 meters away, the stench of rot hit us like a wall. These were products of the northern corruption, and we weren't even in the north yet. Connor spat and cursed his luck. He'd just finished mocking me, which made this extra embarrassing. But he did his job. He ordered his 20 riders into a line, rode up a hill, and charged downhill into the corpse horde with their lances out. The sound of metal punching through rotten flesh was stomach-turning. 7 or 8 corpses went flying off the lance tips like torn sacks, spraying purple corrupted blood everywhere. Then the cavalry circled back with chain hammers and sabers, cutting down corpses like wheat. Horses trampled the fallen ones, crushing their chests under iron hooves. Meanwhile, I'd ordered the slaves to link the wooden carts together into a barrier. I told them any man brave enough to fight would be rewarded. Not a single one moved. They just cowered behind the carts, shaking and praying. My butler was no better. He'd completely lost control of his bladder. He grabbed my robe and begged me to run, calling it a strategic retreat. He said the slaves were disposable. We could buy more later. I shoved his hand off. If this scares you, you really shouldn't be going to the north. Then Ashina jumped down from the wagon. After days of good food, she'd filled out nicely and looked healthy again. She stood in front of me with her little fists raised, shaking like a kitten in a snowstorm, and said she'd protect me. Her wolf ears had flattened into what I can only describe as airplane ears from the stress. I couldn't help but smile. At least the meat and bread weren't wasted on her. Unlike certain family members who ate my food and then stabbed me in the back. The farmers reached us first, crying and screaming. The corpses that slipped past Connor's cavalry slammed into our cart wall. They were too stupid to go around it. They just clawed and bit at the wood like brainless animals. Nobody would help, so I grabbed my sword and did it myself. This body had some basic combat training at least. I waited for a corpse to push against a cart, then drove my blade through its neck and yanked sideways. Its head flopped over onto its chest like a broken tree branch. The smell nearly made me vomit, rotting flesh mixed with something like fermented sewage. But deep down, I felt a spark of excitement. Somewhere in my soul, there was a warrior's blood that enjoyed a fight. Killing corpse creatures isn't that hard, I said, flicking the purple blood off my sword. I was feeling pretty good about myself. Then I almost died. A half-bodied corpse crawled toward my ankle while I wasn't looking. Ashina saved me. She grabbed a manure fork from the cart and stabbed it through the thing's spine, pinning it to the ground. My heart was pounding out of my chest. If I'd been bitten, curing the corpse poison would cost 100 gold coins from a church healer. I rubbed Ashina's head and promised her a gold coin as a reward. Her eyes literally sparkled. She'd never seen that much money in her life. Seeing me and Ashina fighting back, some of the braver male slaves finally picked up farming tools and started attacking the corpses through the cart wall. The creatures weren't actually that strong. They were mindless and couldn't even figure out how to get past the wooden barrier. We finished them off, though one of Connor's riders got unlucky. A corpse in a peasant woman's dress yanked his cape and pulled him off his horse. He cracked his skull on the ground and stopped moving. Connor cursed him for being useless, but I could tell he was more annoyed that I hadn't panicked like he expected. I ordered everyone to cut off the corpses' heads and burn them in a pile. I'd been studying up on corruption. Dead, corrupted bodies pollute the environment and create new infection zones if left alone. Looking at the gray fog stretching across the distant horizon, I had a bad feeling. We weren't even at Nightfall Domain yet, and we'd already run into this many corpses. The refugees we'd saved threw themselves at my feet, kissing my boots and thanking the war god for me. They told me what happened. Death fog had seeped through Cashion fortress's walls and covered their village at night. Most of the villagers were asleep when it hit. They got corrupted and turned into corpses. Only a handful escaped. I asked about their lord. They said Baron Bull and his godchosen had left to investigate some cult, leaving only the Baron's son in charge. We headed to Cashion Fortress. The place was impressive. Massive stone walls, round towers built into the mountain, crossbow turrets, catapults, oil cauldrons everywhere. Enough firepower to stop 100,000 soldiers. Griffin banners flew from every wall. But there was one big problem. The outer walls were completely empty. Not a single soldier anywhere. Connor went pale, worried that beastmen had overrun the fortress. But it was too quiet for that. We moved closer and found the inner castle walls lit with torches and packed with soldiers. They'd abandoned the entire outer defense for some reason. "Who are you? Don't come closer," someone shouted from the wall. I announced myself, Field Rose, Baron, heading to Nightfall Domain, requesting passage through. The Baron's son came to the wall and flat out refused. He said his father wasn't back and nobody was opening those gates, period. He threatened to shoot us with arrows. I tried reminding him that I'd donated money to this place. He sneered and told me my money meant nothing. The whole empire sends money to the border. He called me a nobody outsider. Then I mentioned the refugees I'd rescued and asked him to take them in. That made him even angrier. He screamed that I was trying to dump extra mouths on him, and if I brought them one step closer, his archers would open fire. I was furious. The original Field's years of generous donations, completely worthless. The Baron's son was a coward who'd pulled all his troops back to the inner walls and was too scared to help anyone. If I'd had soldiers of my own, I would have stormed the place right then. I couldn't believe this guy. Baron Bull's son, Richard, was a complete coward. He'd pulled all his soldiers behind the inner walls and abandoned the entire outer fortress. That's why corrupted corpses were wandering freely outside. The Empire's proudest defense line was a joke. Then Richard had the nerve to say he was glad I was going to Nightfall Domain, so I could be a buffer zone between the corpses and his fortress. But if I ever came running back for help, he wouldn't open the gates. My butler whispered that Richard was famously known as the coward. No kidding. As I was fuming, the refugees I'd saved tried to sneak away. Oh no, I wasn't having that. Their lord had abandoned them, which made them ownerless. I told them straight. Either come with me to Nightfall Domain, pay me 5 gold coins each as a rescue fee, or I'd cut them to pieces and feed them to dogs. Ashina actually relaxed when she saw me acting like a proper ruthless noble. She said my kindness over the past few days had felt too unreal. This behavior made more sense to her. The villagers reacted the same way. The threats worked better than politeness ever did. They all knelt down and agreed to follow me. I sighed and covered my face. Fists really do work better than words in this world. Next, Richard had told us the gate to the north was safe. My map said otherwise. It was crawling with red skull icons. That lying rat was trying to get me ambushed by corpses. But then I realized something useful. If Richard had abandoned the entire outer fortress, all the supplies, weapons, and goods out there were just sitting unguarded. Nobody was watching. I could help myself. Forget being nice. These people had shown me nothing but cruelty. Time to take everything I could. I told Chow to gather 30 of the strongest slaves, especially the ones who'd been brave enough to fight the corpses earlier. But first, I needed to deal with Captain Connor. I invited him to join me in, heroically clearing out corpses to help the local farmers. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He refused, saying his job was done. He'd escorted me to the border of Nightfall Domain. Then he laughed in my face and said my slave army would be better replaced with pigs, since at least the pigs would slow the corpses down by making them too full to chase anyone. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted him gone. Connor rode off with his cavalry, and I didn't even get a chance to remind him he still owed me a meal of horse droppings from his bet. Earlier, I left Chow behind to guard the main group of slaves, warning loudly that anyone who tried to run would be burned alive by the soul contract. That kept them in line. I armed 30 slaves with sickles, manure forks, and logging axes, then headed out with Ashina. After 10 minutes, I led everyone into an empty stretch of forest. Using my map to confirm nobody was around, I pulled out a beautiful crystal ball from my horse's saddlebag. I'd noticed something earlier that made me lose focus. Ashina's status panel had changed. I needed to check it carefully. Ashina's status panel had changed. She'd gone from unawakened to ready to awaken. That meant I could use the awakening crystal right now and get myself a god chosen immediately. I pulled out the crystal ball. It had cost me 60 gold coins, a huge chunk of my tiny budget. Ashina looked confused when I told her what it was. She didn't believe she could be a god chosen. I made up some nonsense about receiving divine guidance and told her to close her eyes and feel the crystal's power. The moment her hands touched the crystal ball, blue starlight poured out and formed the image of an elegant, cold-looking goddess. The winter goddess, the subhuman slaves cried out, dropping to their knees. She was their deity. They were shaking with emotion, staring at Ashina in disbelief. I was sweating with excitement too. This was a real miracle happening in front of me. The blue light formed a rune that settled onto Ashina's hand. Then her body transformed. She grew taller. Her features became sharper and more beautiful. Her skin turned pale as snow, and her red eyes radiated an icy power. She looked about 30% prettier than before, fierce, proud, and stunning. I'm really a god chosen. She stared at me with total awe. How did you know? No big deal, I said casually, waving my hand like it was nothing. The other slaves were stunned. They'd all thought I was just keeping Ashina as a plaything. Now they figured I must be someone favored by the gods themselves. Their fear turned into genuine respect. I seized the moment and addressed them all. Anyone still worried about our trip north? Follow me, do your jobs, and I'll give you your freedom and a good life. Nobody argued. Ashina asked to form a contract with me right away. The process was simple. Her rune connected with me, and the bond was sealed. Then I publicly tore up her slave contract and declared her a free citizen of Nightfall Domain. She smiled and raised her hand. A rune materialized into a massive black dragon wolf, armored in dark scales, radiating cold energy. It leaped out of thin air and scared everyone half to death. A dragon wolf, she explained. A mount gifted by the goddess. I also know many combat techniques now. I checked her updated panel. Name, Ashina level. First rank God-chosen class. Wolf Cavalry Divine Skill. Spear of Extreme Cold Legion Skill. Howling. Charge, doubles cavalry charge power. Her Dragon Wolf mount alone could match a third-rank combat knight. With this kind of power, my stepmother and that rotten brother of mine were nothing. I'd grind them into the dirt eventually. Now it was time to go shopping at Baron Bull's abandoned outer fortress. My map showed scattered skull icons moving around inside. I drew my sword and lit one of my fog-clearing lanterns, which pushed back the death fog so my people wouldn't get corrupted. I announced that clearing out corruption was every imperial noble's duty, a perfectly legal excuse to be here. Ashina noticed the lantern contained God-chosen power. I told her each one cost 25 gold coins and only lasted 30 days. If I could figure out how to make them, it'd be a gold mine. I kept everyone grouped together as we entered the fortress. These slaves had zero military training. Sticking close was the only safe option. Ashina peeked into the barracks and found 2 armored soldier corpses that had been corrupted. They didn't even have weapons. The fog had gotten them before they could grab any. Kill them, I ordered. And try not to damage the armor. I want it. Ashina kicked open the door and charged in. As a god chosen, her body was far stronger now, and she'd gained expert combat skills instantly. When Ashina kicked open that door, the noise echoed through the fog, and every corpse nearby started howling. I could see skull icons on my map rushing toward us, and I won't lie, I was nervous. But Ashina was incredible. She cut the first corpse's head clean off, then dodged the second one and sliced half its skull away like it was nothing. When a whole crowd of armored corpse soldiers came pouring out of a hallway, she summoned her dragon wolf. The massive beast blocked the entire corridor and blasted blue fire down the passage, turning every corpse to ash in seconds. The slaves who'd been debating whether to fight or run just stood there with their mouths open. The battle was over before most of them even saw what happened. That's God-chosen power, I said, though I was annoyed she'd burned the armor I wanted. Everyone make noise, bang on things, draw the nearby corpses in so we can wipe them out. The slaves banged and smashed while Ashina and her wolf destroyed every corpse that came running. We cleared the whole barracks area quickly. Now, I grinned, let's find the good stuff. Weapons and gold especially. But before we could search properly, a slave came running back. They'd found survivors. I wasn't happy about that. I immediately told Ashina to hide her wolf. If word got out that I had a god chosen, my stepmother would send assassins to kill me and steal Ashina. The slaves seeing her power was fine. They were under my control. But strangers were a different story. The survivors were hiding in a bunker behind a door coated in purification potion. There were about 10 soldiers led by a big bearded officer. When they heard living voices, they finally opened up. The officer assumed I was some young knight and promised to report my bravery to Baron Bull. I corrected him. I was Baron Field Rose. His expression changed instantly. He knew my name. The generous fool who donated money and had no guards. His eyes darted to his men, and he gave them a signal. He told me their story. They'd gotten drunk, forgot to light the fog lantern, and the death fog flooded the barracks. Losing the barracks was a death sentence under Baron Bull's rule. They'd be executed. So, I said, reading the room, you want to join me? They all burst out laughing and gripped their weapons. We're running away, the officer said. But we need a noble's savings for travel money. And if we kill you, nobody will know we exist for a while. I was furious. I just saved these people, and they wanted to rob and murder me. The original Field was known for being kind and weak. They thought I was easy prey. You think I'm nothing? The officer sneered. If we'd had a fog lantern, we'd have fought our way out without you. I laughed. What's so funny? He raised his saber, confused by my calm. Honestly, I came here to loot this place anyway. Killing you just means no witnesses. Ashina, do it. One soldier lunged at me with a knife. A blue blur flashed past, and his entire arm ripped off at the shoulder. The knife clattered to the ground. He collapsed screaming, blood spraying everywhere. Then the dragon wolf appeared, filling the corridor like a tank covered in dark scales. The soldiers lost control of their bladders on the spot. What the hell? The officer stammered. They said Field Rose was a total nobody. Ashina, I said, licking my lips, cripple all of them. And slaves, here's your chance to toughen up. 1 silver coin for every man you kill. This world runs on blood and cruelty. Being nice gets you killed. I was done being patient and kind. From now on, iron and blood would do my talking. Being shameless is a noble's passport. The slaves turned out to be surprisingly good at killing humans. Way less hesitation than with the corpses. One slave charged in, pinned down a wounded soldier, and hacked his head off with a sickle. I tossed him a silver coin on the spot and announced that slaves under my command could own property, and the more they worked, the more they'd earn. That lit a fire in everyone's eyes. 1 silver coin buys 100 blackbreads, 100 days of life. With Ashina's dragon wolf leading the charge, the slaves rushed in fearlessly. The armored soldiers were a joke against a god chosen. The wolf flattened men in full-plate armor with a single swipe. After it was over, I stepped carefully past the body parts and entered the bunker. It was a weapons armory. I nearly screamed with joy. Mountains of well-oiled armor stacked neatly, racks of halberds, steel sabers, and iron-rimmed shields, crossbows hanging on walls, barrels full of different types of arrows. Enough to fully equip 500 soldiers from head to toe. Did we just get rich? Ashina asked, picking up a cavalry bow and grinning. A little rich, I said, though inside I was over the moon. I told everyone to gear up immediately. The slaves strapped on armor for the first time in their lives. It was too big on their skinny bodies, but you could see them standing taller with pride. But weapons weren't enough. I needed more for my gamble in the north. I called over the slave who'd gotten the first kill, a guy named Wildcat. I gave him special instructions, rehearsed the plan twice, then sent him out with 20 armed slaves carrying Baron Bull's family banner. My plan was simple. Since Baron Bull's coward son had abandoned the outer fortress, I was going to squeeze everything I could from the surrounding villages too. 6 fat villages supplied this fortress with livestock, grain, and tax money year-round. Time to collect. Wildcat marched his squad to Oxhorn village, where the locals spotted the Bull family flag and opened the gates without question. The village chief came out grinning, offering to present young girls to please the Baron, a standard, disgusting feudal tradition. When the chief looked confused about not recognizing Wildcat, my man did exactly what I'd taught him. When in doubt, just start cursing. He drew his saber and screamed insults until the chief was trembling and apologizing. Then Wildcat started listing taxes to collect: farm tax, population tax, household tax, faith tax, land tax, military exemption tax, breathing tax. Medieval taxation has a flavor for every peasant. I told him to throw in as many as he could think of. Meanwhile, I had the rest of my people hauling every piece of equipment from the armory, lowering it over the fortress walls to collect later. Every sword, every shield, every suit of armor. It was all Nightfall domain property now. Richard the Coward had tried to use me as a meat shield and lied about the gate being safe. So I had zero guilt about robbing his daddy's fortress blind. He deserved every bit of this. Wildcat did a great job. When the villagers complained it wasn't tax season, he told them the army needed extra supplies to fight the corpse invasion. Pay up or die? The village chief caved immediately and started handing over everything. 2 cows, for sheep, chickens, ducks, 5 carts of grain, 7 gold coins, 23 silver, and 50 copper. The whole village sounded like a funeral. A year's worth of savings, gone in one night. The chief even offered up a young girl as a gift for the Baron. Apparently that was Baron Bull's regular demand. Wildcat almost refused, but realized that would blow his cover, so he brought her along. Meanwhile, I was still looting the fortress. In another bunker, I found the fog-clearing lanterns the bearded officer had been desperate for, 3 of them, plus a huge stash of healing potions. Total value easily over 200 gold coins. When Wildcat came back with all that livestock and grain, I was genuinely shocked. One tiny village produced all this? The tax rates must be brutal. At least I wouldn't run out of meat anytime soon. I felt a twinge of guilt. I'd basically robbed a village. But I knocked myself on the head and told myself to stop being soft. Modern morals don't work in a medieval world where the strong eat the weak. I was about to enter a death zone. Survival comes first. Besides, Nightfall Domain would serve as a buffer protecting Baron Bull's territory from the north. Consider this my payment for that service. I rewarded everyone with a silver coin and announced a new rule. Any slave who saves up 1 gold coin and pays it to me earns their freedom as a citizen of Nightfall Domain. The slaves erupted in cheers. Real hope, maybe for the first time in their lives. Wildcat was fired up. Let's hit the other villages. His sympathy for fellow commoners vanished the moment he got paid. He was on my team now. I sent him out with orders to squeeze the remaining villages before morning. We had to move fast. Other imperial cities would eventually notice the chaos at Cashion Fortress and send troops. Getting caught red-handed would be bad. Then Wildcat brought me the girl the village chief had offered up. She was about 12, wearing a plain robe. I almost yelled at him, but he explained he'd taken her to avoid blowing his cover. Smart move. I kept her. She'd already seen too much to send back, and returning her to a life of being gifted to barons wasn't an option either. The next morning, Ashina woke up in a good mood after sleeping on a soft mattress for the first time. She came running over to me, all eager and ready. I told her today was the day, We were heading into the gray fog. I'd been studying old maps of the northern province. My target was a large manor that once belonged to a female baron named Sophia Starite. Her Starite city was nearby. Building a castle from scratch with my resources was impossible, so the plan was to capture the manor first, then slowly expand toward the city. The risk was enormous. Many brave knights had tried to reclaim the north before. Most never came back, and the ones who stayed behind almost certainly became monsters themselves. They're probably boss-level creatures now, I muttered. Just my luck. The strategy looked good on paper. But actually pulling it off? That was going to be terrifying. My butler Chow reported that everything was packed: 7 cows, 20 sheep, a pack horse, and all the other support supplies from our tax collection. He was miserable about entering the north, but he had no choice. Wildcat and the other slaves I'd won over with silver coins had become my loyal watchdogs. Chow knew that if he tried to run, they'd kill him for a 1-coin reward. Chow asked me to prove that Ashina was really a god chosen. I shut him down fast. Do I need to prove anything to you? Want to switch jobs? You lead the expedition, and I'll be the butler. He went pale and shut his mouth. He'd been whining and spreading negativity the whole trip, and it was time he felt some pressure. With no more objections, I lit a fog-clearing lantern, 25 gold coins burning away by the minute, and we stepped into the northern province. Everything went silent. Every sound, every trace of life, just vanished. Gray fog surrounded us on all sides, so thick we couldn't even see the sun. It felt like sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The ground was covered in squirming red-black tendrils, corrupted plants that tangled around our cart wheels. Broken walls, shriveled heads stuck on rusted spears, faded griffin banners from failed imperial expeditions. The soldiers they'd sent here had all become locals. This is literally Silent Hill, I muttered, forcing myself to walk at the front. If the cowardly noble wasn't running, nobody else had an excuse to either. Strange howls echoed from deep in the fog. The lantern only lit about 100 paces ahead. Everyone was terrified. Then Ashina's red eyes locked onto something to our right. A corpse with half its face missing stumbled into view. She drew her bow and put an arrow through its skull. It exploded like a watermelon. But my map lit up with skull icons. A whole swarm was coming. Circle the carts into a wall. Crossbowmen, get ready, I shouted. Thanks to the fortress raid, I had 80 crossbows and 100 bows. Only 2 or 3 slaves actually knew how to shoot a bow, but crossbows are easy. Point and pull. I'd armed 20 crossbowmen. A black wave of corpses came pouring out of the fog, howling and stumbling over each other. My crossbowmen let loose. The front row of corpses dropped like they'd hit an invisible wall. Ashina summoned her dragon wolf and charged straight into the horde. Her blade danced like a butterfly, heads flew, and the wolf crushed bodies with its claws. When she reached the thickest part of the swarm, the wolf spun and blasted fire in every direction, a tornado of blue flame that turned everything to ash. Chow stared with his jaw hanging open. She's really a god chosen. Ashina handled most of the heavy fighting, but corpses kept emerging from the fog endlessly. Wildcat and his squad fought bravely, jabbing halberds into chests and flinging corpses aside. The armor we'd taken from the fortress paid off. Corpse fists and claws bounced off the plate with metallic clangs. Then I noticed something on my map, a fast-moving skull icon directly above me. I jumped off my horse instantly. Good thing I did. A rush of wind hit me from above. I ducked and stabbed upward with my sword, catching a glimpse of the attacker. It was a Batwoman, hairless, eyebrowless, with an ugly face. Her body was female, but her arms were bat wings and her legs ended in razor-sharp talons. The Batwoman was disgusting. She swooped down and snatched up one of my female slaves, tore her in half midair, and let the blood rain down on us while cackling. I was furious. Every person in my group cost me money. Shoot that ugly thing down, I screamed. The crossbowman opened fire and nailed her with 3 or 4 bolts. She crashed to the ground like a torn rag. I grabbed a halberd from a cart and smashed her skull to pieces. Forget noble manners. Nobody attacks my people. But while we were distracted, corpses flooded our unguarded side. Ashina's dragon wolf charged up a massive blast of blue fire and torched the entire area. The heat was so intense that my armored soldiers were practically cooking inside their gear. Even the corrupted blood dried and crusted onto their armor. Ashina stuck out her tongue. Sorry, we survived the first wave. Lost 3 slaves and 1 guard. Acceptable losses. I ordered a 30-minute rest and sent the women to collect arrows. I drank some cold water to remind myself this was real, then rubbed Ashina's head in thanks. Her wolf tail spun like a helicopter propeller and her face turned red. She tried acting modest, but her expression screamed, "Keep praising me. Without her, I'd be dead already." This cursed land earned its name. Then my map showed something new, red exclamation marks, 19 of them, moving in a neat formation toward us. 2 organized to be monsters. I sent Ashina ahead to hide in the fog and prepare an ambush. It was Captain Connor and his cavalry. They hadn't actually left, they'd circled back to kill me. Their plan was simple. Charge in, kill me first, slaughter the slaves, steal our fog lanterns, and let the gray fog destroy any evidence. They'd been looking for a chance to murder me ever since we entered the north, wanting to stage it so they'd have an alibi. Connor was already imagining me begging for my life when he spotted my group. His smile died instantly. Instead of a helpless nobleman with a bunch of naked slaves, he saw 30 fully armored soldiers in formation with shields and halberds, covered in corpse blood and guts. Behind them, 2 rows of crossbowmen had their weapons loaded and aimed. All the equipment we'd looted from Cashion fortress. "We've been spotted," Connor stammered. His men panicked. Charging horses into armored halberd infantry behind a cart wall? That's suicide, not a surprise attack. Connor yanked his reins to retreat, and the dragon wolf appeared behind him. His horse stumbled in terror and threw him off. Before he could grab his weapon, Ashina had a spear at his throat and had already snatched his fog lantern. Without a lantern, his men would be corrupted and die in minutes. That's the slave field bot. Connor recognized her. But a slave who moves freely in death fog without a lantern? His men realized the horrible truth. She was a god-chosen. If they'd known, no amount of money would have made them come back here. I strolled over with a friendly smile, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, Captain Connor, what are you doing here? Were you worried I wouldn't make it to my territory on time?" "Don't worry. Serving my family is a noble's duty." Connor's mouth opened and closed. Caught between life and death, his brain completely shut down. I put on my warmest smile and said, "So you're here to escort us, right? Just like the knightly code says." Connor grabbed that lifeline instantly. "Yes, exactly. I invited the cavalry to dismount and have some wheat beer. They were nervous but figured I was too stupid to have seen through them. After all, the old field was known for being a naive pushover." Once they were off their horses and relaxed, Connor tried to make excuses to leave. I told him I was keeping their horses for hauling supplies. He could have them back at Nightfall Domain. He panicked and begged to go. I dropped the act. Ashina's wolf bit one rider's head clean off. The crunching sound silenced everyone. Even my own people stopped breathing. Connor threw himself on the ground and confessed. My second sister Liz had ordered him to kill me. "Go scout ahead," I said with a smile, "or die right now." He chose scouting. I put the 18 horseless cavalry at the front of our column, knowing from my map that a massive wave of corpses was heading our way. They'd absorbed the first hit. It took 3 more days to reach the Starite manor. My map let us dodge most of the hordes, but the ones we couldn't avoid were brutal. Connor's men dropped one by one until only he was left. He was actually tough, but covered in wounds that were already corrupting, turning his flesh into something inhuman. He was dying. "Give him a quick death," I said. Ashina put an arrow through him. My slaves went through his pockets without hesitation. They'd gotten very efficient at that. We made it to Starite Manor. I exhaled deeply when we reached the entrance. Everyone cheered. Without Ashina and my map, we'd never have survived. The endless corpse hordes would have swallowed us whole. Ashina pulled the thorns off the front gate, and the rusted iron doors collapsed with a crash. She jumped back like a startled cat and smiled awkwardly. "Guess the door needs fixing." Even covered in gray fog corruption, you could tell this place had been magnificent. Ornate European-style iron gates, stone carvings, statues, decorative gardens. The estate covered 30 hectares, roughly 40 soccer fields. It had swimming pools, gardens, farmhouses, forests, barns, wine cellars, stables, 3 guest villas, and a massive main building in the center. The previous owner, Baroness Sophia Starite, had ruled an entire prosperous city. This was generational wealth on display. My slaves were giddy just being near a noble estate. For people at the bottom, even sweeping floors in a place like this was a story you'd tell your grandchildren on your deathbed. I studied the estate map against my system map. The barns and stables were worthless after 10 years of corruption. So were the gardens. The real question was where to start. Should we clear the main building? Ashina asked eagerly. She'd never seen anything this fancy before. I stared at the main building. Through the broken windows, I could see shadows moving inside. Then I felt something staring back at me, a heavy pressure on my chest that made my breath catch. I looked away quickly. My map showed the main building was packed with skull icons, and deep in the basement sat a single massive red, something different from the regular corpse monsters. There's something terrifying in there, I said, rubbing my temples. We're not touching the main building. Not yet. Ashina noticed I looked troubled and came over to check on me. I didn't want to spread my anxiety, so I teased her by pinching her wolf ear and joking about giving her a massage. She turned bright red before realizing I was messing with her, then puffed up her cheeks and said I was mean. I needed a proper shelter. Sleeping in those creaky wagons was killing my neck. After studying the map, I chose the large winery as our first base. It was built from brick and stone, so it wouldn't have rotted into rubble like the wooden structures. The winery sat southeast of the main building, surrounded by what used to be beautiful farmland growing black pearl grapes for the empire's finest wine. Now it was just fields of squirming black tentacles and corrupted flesh. I ordered the women to start clearing the farmland. The corrupted stuff looked horrifying, eyeball-covered meat blobs and writhing tentacles, but it was actually harmless. I kicked one to prove my point. These disgusting things used to be cute little animals before the fog turned them. Nobody moved until I offered 10 copper coins per person for finishing within 2 days. Suddenly, everyone was working at 10 times the speed. My butler rolled his eyes and muttered about how hanging lazy slaves would be easier than paying them. Then the free villagers I'd forced to come along started complaining. They said the soil was poisoned and useless for farming. Stomping the ground made purple toxic water pool up. They said I was dreaming. I went quiet, and Wildcat's guards drew their swords in unison. The villagers instantly remembered who they were talking to and threw themselves on the ground, sweating and terrified. I let the silence hang for half a minute. I wasn't trying to be a tyrant for fun. But out here, far from any law or order, if I couldn't control my people, I might as well hang myself from a tree. I sent the loudest complainer to take 5 lashes, then put the rest to work clearing the eastern fields. Next, the winery itself. When we pulled open the doors, the stench nearly made me vomit. Ashina didn't even flinch. She'd lived in worse conditions as a slave. She heard footsteps on the second floor. Lots of them. I told her no fire this time. The building might contain flammable materials, and we needed the structure intact. I grabbed an iron-rimmed shield and my sword, then had the guards form up with halberds. They weren't trained soldiers, but weeks of fighting had taught them the basics. They could hold a formation now. I banged my sword against my shield and yelled into the darkness. Hey neighbors, we're here with a warm welcome. Howling erupted from inside. Corrupted monsters came pouring out of the blackness, twisted, deformed things that barely looked human anymore. Metal clashed against rotten flesh as the fight exploded. Ashina and her wolf held the main wave. Her spear cut through corpses effortlessly, and the dragon wolf was like a tank. Dozens of corpses piled onto it without even scratching its scales. Without the no-fire rule, she could have ended this in seconds. One of my frontline guards speared a corpse, but got knocked down by the ones behind it. He crashed to the ground in full armor, and more corpses swarmed over him. I stepped forward and split a corpse's skull with my sword, cutting the head clean off. The guard stared up at me with pure terror and gratitude, his pants soaked. From the look on his face, he'd never been this thankful to a noble in his entire life. I pulled the downed guard to his feet and punched his shoulder. Training good soldiers isn't easy. I'm counting on you guys to earn your freedom and become real warriors. Maybe even knights someday. That lit a fire in everyone. They'd thought my promises were just noble lies, but saving that guard's life in person showed them I was different. They charged into the remaining corpses screaming my name, and we cleared over 70 of them from the winery. I wondered why a winery needed that many workers, and why the Empire never evacuated the northern people before unleashing the death fog. But I pushed those thoughts aside. not my problem. Deeper inside, I found the brewing room. I'd hoped for usable supplies like grain or sugar. Instead, there was a Batwoman's corpse ripped open from neck to groin, organs missing. The barley scattered around the floor had been corrupted for 10 years. The grains were actually wriggling on their own. I muttered that maybe the corruption wasn't a curse, but some kind of radiation. Ashina was puzzling over the word, radiation, when her face suddenly changed. Something's coming fast. It was so quick I barely saw the skull icon flash onto my map. A guard in front of me raised his shield. It shattered into pieces. The guard went flying. Standing where he'd been was a monster that looked like the liquor from Resident Evil, except it had clearly mutated from a rat. Thin tail, long snout, massive claws. The rat monster swiped at me. I saw the claw growing larger in my vision. Ashina's dragon wolf threw itself in front of me, curling its body around me like a shield. Sparks exploded as the claws raked across its scales, but the wolf didn't even flinch. Only 2 bloody scales came off. The monster stared at its own claws in confusion. The wolf slapped it across the room. Wildcat and the guards rushed in with swords and halberds, hacking away, but the thing's hide was too thick. Their weapons barely scratched it. Then it swept its limbs and sent 7 or 8 fully armored men flying like dust. "Fall back," I shouted, ducking behind a wall with my shield. I forgot to bring the crossbows. That's the only thing normal people can use to pierce this thing's skin. This was a 3rd-rank corrupted creature. Normally, you'd need a 3rd-rank knight with combat aura or a siege crossbow to kill it. Ashina poured power into her spear and drove it into the rat monster's body. The wolf slammed into its chest at full speed like a freight train, knocking it back and exposing its weak spot. Then Ashina used her divine skill for the first time. Spear of extreme cold. Blue starlight gathered into a glowing spear that looked like a roaring ice dragon. She planted her feet, twisted her hips, and hurled it with everything she had. The spear hit the monster and basically liquefied it. Blood sprayed, bones snapped, chunks of flesh splattered across the walls. Finally done, Ashina panted, looking pale. I exhaled hard. "Good thing you're here. You get the last deer's steak tonight. Long live the Lord." Her tail wagged uncontrollably and drool escaped her mouth. The ice-cold warrior goddess vanished instantly, replaced by the food-obsessed wolf girl. She caught herself and offered to split the steak with me. I appreciated that. My map showed only a few small skull icons left in the winery. I took the wounded outside for treatment, then brought a rested team back to sweep the building clean. It took until 9 at night. The whole place was falling apart, collapsed sections everywhere, wind whistling through cracks in the stone. But the main structure held. The 1st and 2nd floors had nothing valuable, just blackened wood useful for building shacks or burning. Then we opened the cellar door. A dark staircase descended into the underground. I rubbed my hands nervously. Buddha help me. God help me. Please let there be something useful down there. The cellar was stacked with oak sherry barrels. Some had been crushed by cave-ins, leaving dried stains everywhere. Rat tracks covered the floor. When I first saw the wrecked cellar, my heart sank. But luck hadn't completely abandoned me. After searching around, I found sealed barrels. I tapped one. A deep, full sound echoed back. My pulse quickened. "Open it," I said, trying to play it cool. "Hopefully it's wine and not tentacles. The gray fog only corrupts living things. If the wine was properly sealed, it should be fine." A guard pried off the lid. Pop, and the richest, most incredible wine aroma filled the room. Smelling top-shelf grape wine in a building full of rotting monsters was the strangest experience of my life. "Black pearl wine," I said, barely containing my excitement. "It's been extinct in the Empire for 10 years. Ashina gently warned me not to drink too much." I laughed. "I'm more of an iced tea guy. This wine wasn't for drinking." Every barrel was liquid gold. If I could get even a few to any city in the Empire, nobles would fight each other for a taste. This could bring in massive income. Ashina suggested we could also start brewing our own wine since we now controlled the Starite winery. Smart girl, but survival comes first. I left Chow to count the usable barrels and went to survey my territory. The area I controlled was roughly the size of a school playground, centered on the winery. As long as we kept the fog pushed back, people could live and work on it. Everything was still covered in corrupted plants and creatures, but my people were making progress clearing it out. They piled the harmless but polluting blobs together and burned them using broken wood from the winery. The screaming sounds the creatures made while burning were horrible. I noticed something while walking around. The class divide in this world was staggering. The maids lived far better than the slaves, eating nobles' leftovers and getting actual rest time. The slaves stared at them with envy. I remembered a story about my father. A peasant once saved the family's trade convoy by reporting an enemy ambush. The earl used the information to crush the attackers. The peasant's reward? He was hanged because his dirty shoes left muddy footprints on the earl's carpet. That's how nobles see commoners here, less than dirt. I wasn't going to become that kind of person, but I wasn't going to be a saint either. My goal was simple: give my people a decent life, as long as they followed orders. I called my servants together, my butler Chow, 2 maids, 1 manservant, and a cook. That's my entire household staff. Back on Earth, having even 1 servant is impressive. In this world, I'm pathetically understaffed. My sister who sent cavalry to kill me has 20 male servants alone, including ones just for cutting her meat and trimming her nails. The servants arrived and immediately looked down at the ground. Making eye contact with a noble is considered rude here. Chow reported that counting the wine barrels would take at least 2 more days. He looked thin and weak, though he actually earned the highest salary in my territory, 5 silver and 50 copper per month, plus whatever he skimmed from purchasing duties. To put money in perspective, 1 copper coin buys 1 black bread, a rock-hard loaf made from rye bran mixed with sawdust and bark. You have to soak it in hot soup to even chew it, then eat it with gritty salt. It tastes bitter and terrible, but many people can't even afford 2 of these a day, which is how they end up as slaves. My maids and cook each made 15 copper per day. Not much, but enough to keep them fed. I was about to change some things around here. I realized I didn't even know my manservant's name. Chow told me. The boy was called Clay Pot, 16 years old, parents were farmers. The cook was Plate, and the 2 maids were Scissors and Sparrow. In this world, only nobles and powerful people get nice-sounding names. I rewarded Clay Pot with a silver coin for making my bed in the wagon so comfortable during the journey. The kid was terrified when I called his name. He thought I was going to fire him for slacking off yesterday. When I praised him instead, he threw himself at my feet and kissed my boots in gratitude. The others shot him jealous looks. 1 silver coin was 6 days' wages. Then I announced a new rule. Every month, the best performing servant would win a silver coin bonus. Good cooking, clean rooms, hard work, I'd notice everything. Their eyes lit up with competitive fire. What I really wanted was for them to start watching each other and reporting problems to me. A united group of servants might look nice, but they could also team up to cheat their lord. A little healthy competition and snitching would keep everyone honest. After the others left, Chow stayed behind. He'd changed his attitude completely since we actually survived entering the cursed lands. No more whining. He was working seriously now. He raised a concern about my policy of offering freedom to subhuman slaves. He said they were stupid and didn't deserve the same chances as humans, except for Ashina, of course. I told him we were in a cursed death zone. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Nightfall Domain would have its own rules, and I'd announce them tomorrow. That night, I sat down with pen and paper to plan. In Chinese characters only I could read, I wrote 2 words, plunder and explore. My territory had nothing. 200 people couldn't build anything from scratch fast enough, especially on poisoned soil. A knock at the door, Ashina. I'd asked her to come discuss the territory plan. She showed up in her shortened maid outfit, looking shy and nervous. It hit me that calling a young woman to my room late at night sent the wrong message. I cleared my throat and explained it was strictly business. She relaxed, though I thought I caught a flicker of disappointment. She admitted she had no management experience. She'd been a hunter's daughter before becoming a slave. Couldn't read or write. I told her I'd teach her personally. As a god-chosen, she had natural advantages. In this world, becoming a god-chosen is the ultimate class upgrade. A condemned criminal could become a VIP overnight if she awakened, because the gods don't choose wrong. Then I dropped the bomb. I'm going to raid my brother's territory. Ashina froze. After a moment, she said she'd support me unconditionally. She told me she could sense I wasn't a cruel or evil person. During her time as my slave, I'd never mistreated her or done anything inappropriate while she slept. I was the most unusual person she'd ever met. A noble who treated subhumans as equals, maybe even liked them. A gentleman. I poured her some red tea and explained my reasoning. My brother had threatened to torture and kill anyone I cared about. I wasn't the old field who'd just take it. I needed to strike first and hard. My plan: use the 20 warhorses Connor's cavalry had kindly donated to train a light raiding cavalry, built specifically for quick strikes and looting. The next morning, I called every single person in my territory to a meeting, including all slaves. Everyone's eyes went straight to the wooden chest beside me, overflowing with silver and copper coins. I didn't give a speech. I just pulled out a list of names. Guard squad members, come up when I call your name. 1 silver coin for every corpse you killed. I keep my promises. I handed out the bounty money personally. These slaves were crying with joy. The top performer, a guy named Iron Hammer, earned 17 silver coins in 1 day, more money than most people see in their entire lives. Even my maids were jealous. Everyone who hadn't joined the guard squad was kicking themselves. With everyone's attention locked on the money, I announced my development plan for Nightfall Domain. Rule 1. To earn your freedom, you need to make me 1 gold coin. Sounds impossible? Look at Iron Hammer, 17 silver in a single day. 1 silver per corpse kill. I'll also post non-combat tasks like farming, building walls, and repairs, all paying bounties. I desperately needed free citizens. Slaves have no motivation. Free people feed themselves, pay taxes, and actually want to learn useful skills. Rule 2. No racial discrimination. I don't care if you're human or subhuman. My God-chosen is a wolf subhuman, so drop the prejudice. Look around you at this death fog. Don't get everyone killed over something stupid. Personally, I like subhumans. Be hardworking and don't cause trouble, and you're a good citizen in my book. Ashina's eyes went red with emotion. She'd never experienced respect like this. Rule 3. Include Ashina's name in your daily prayers. I wasn't thrilled about this one. I wanted to build a more rational society. But the books said God-chosen grow stronger through faith and city prosperity. Ashina needed believers to reach 2nd rank. I had doubts. If faith alone determined power, the Pope's nation would be the strongest, which it wasn't. But without the luxury of experimenting, I'd follow proven methods for now. Next, I opened military recruitment. No salary, but 3 meals a day, plus bounty money from kills. Last time nobody wanted to join. This time people were shoving each other to sign up. I didn't take everyone. Run 5 laps around the territory. I'll pick the best performers. You can quit anytime. 6 people dropped out immediately. Lazy types satisfied with 1 bread a day. I didn't want soldiers like that. The rest started running. They were mostly skin and bones, pathetically weak. The last person didn't finish until noon, stumbling across the line barely conscious. I smiled at that one. Physical fitness can be improved. Willpower can't. I kicked out 2 cheaters who'd skipped laps and ended up with 23 new recruits. I pulled all the wolf subhumans from the original 30-man guard and combined them with new recruits to form a 20-person raiding cavalry. The remaining soldiers became a 33-man defense squad. Any proper noble would think I was insane for arming slaves and putting them on war horses. My butler certainly did. He came to me sputtering that slaves would eat the valuable horses before learning to ride them, and that real soldiers come from military families with proper training and noble character. So what's your brilliant alternative? I asked. We're surrounded by monsters. Hire mercenaries and adventurers, obviously, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mercenaries? Those unreliable cells words would betray me the first chance they got. History has proven again and again that the best armies come from ordinary people fighting for their own future. Thanks for the advice, Chow, but I'm giving them a chance, I said firmly. Add an extra egg to every soldier's meal today. This afternoon, I'm taking them out to clear monsters. They'll prove their worth. I couldn't take everyone, though. I had to leave enough defenders at base in case something attacked while we were gone. At 1 in the afternoon, I led my soldiers into the gray fog. Time barely exists in here. Everything is the same dull gray until nightfall, when it becomes pitch black. Ashina rode ahead on her dragon wolf, scouting the path. Her God-chosen eyes could see far better than ours in this murk. We were heading for Rum Village, a place that once supplied vegetables to the nearby city. According to my map, it wasn't far. Ashina spotted 7 corpses approaching from the right. Small fry, perfect training for the new recruits. The newbies were terrified. You could hear them all gulping at the same time. But I was standing right behind them, and they didn't dare run. I think the memory of that egg at lunch helped too. Most of these slaves had never eaten an egg in their entire lives. Some of them had swallowed theirs whole at lunch and nearly choked. For that kind of happiness, they'd risk death. The veteran guards pinned the first corpse with halberds while Wildcat coached a new soldier through his first kill. The poor kid couldn't stop shaking. He raised his halberd 3 times and couldn't bring himself to stab. He even wet his pants. "It's a devil," he stammered. I barked at him. "Even if it's a devil, you've got me and a god-chosen right here. We'll kill devils too. Now stab." He finally thrust the halberd, with his eyes closed, nearly falling into the corpse's arms, but he did it. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed. But he'd taken the first step, and that's what mattered. The others followed his lead. We cleared those corpses easily and pushed on to Rum Village. But when we got close, something weird showed up on my map, skull icons trembling and clustered together. Ashina's face turned bright red, and she suggested she go ahead alone. Very suspicious. I insisted we go together. I immediately regretted that decision. A huge pile of deformed corpses was in the fields outside the village, mindlessly doing reproductive motions with each other. Completely grotesque. Nothing even worked anymore on their rotted bodies, but some primal instinct kept them going. I covered my face. Did I transmigrate into an adult game world? That explained why the female corpses never had clothes. My soldiers burst out laughing, and the heavy, oppressive atmosphere vanished instantly. Ashina, face burning red, ordered her dragon wolf to blast the whole scene with fire. Blue flames consumed everything, bones popping and cracking until nothing remained but ash. A few surviving corpses charged from behind, but Iron Hammer bashed one flat with his shield and stomped its chest cavity to pieces. The rest of the guards piled in. Every corpse was a walking silver coin to them. "Push into the village. Stay within the fog lantern's range," I ordered, holding the lantern myself. I was itching to fight, but couldn't risk the light source. The soldiers advanced together, and I noticed something. Their footsteps were falling into rhythm naturally, creating a unified drumbeat. The new recruits, caught up in the group's momentum, stopped hesitating and joined the killing. We cleared most of Rum Village quickly. I set the fog lantern down by a collapsed well in the center and called a rest. 5 minutes later, my map exploded with red skull icons. A massive wave, moving faster than a trotting horse, was closing in from all directions. A lookout came sprinting toward me, screaming about what he'd seen. I cut him off. Running now would mean colliding head-on with whatever was coming. Our only option was to dig in and defend right here. Ashina grabbed my arm and whispered that if things went bad, she could break us out. I nodded but told her I wouldn't run unless absolutely necessary. This time I'd brought crossbows, lesson learned from last time. Good thing too, because a dwarf-sized monster with long arms suddenly vaulted over a wall and latched onto one of my guards, biting at his armor so hard the metal screeched. Ashina sliced it in half instantly. It was a corrupted monkey, and it wasn't alone. The entire village erupted. Hundreds of monkey monsters came pouring over the ruins like a dark flood, leaping and screeching everywhere. I forced myself to stay calm and scanned my map for an escape route. Southeast. There's a big courtyard. "Run!" I shouted. My crossbowmen fired into the swarm. Monkey bodies burst open and piled up on the ground. Ashina's dragon wolf blasted a path with fire while Ashina herself covered our rear, cutting 5 monkeys in half with a single sword swing. She even stomped one's head flat with her boot when it tried to ambush her from the ground. We made it into the courtyard and barricaded the gate with rocks and rotten furniture. But looking at my map, the red icons stretched endlessly. The only good news? The horde wasn't targeting us. They were migrating somewhere else and had just grazed past Rum Village. "Hold the gate and take turns resting," I told everyone. "They're just passing through." My armored guards formed a wall at the entrance. The monkeys couldn't break through full-plate armor and heavy shields. Ashina's wolf sat in the gap like a fire-breathing tank. Even buried under piles of creatures, not a single scale cracked. After 30 brutal minutes, the wave finally passed. Ashina was drenched in sweat. She'd done everything: tanking, killing, and protecting the weaker spots. Without her, we'd have lost people. Everyone was basically dead weight dragging her down, but training the soldiers was necessary. No meal goes uneaten for free, she winked. The guards thanked her sincerely. The distrust they'd once felt toward a subhuman was gone, replaced by genuine respect. I realized we desperately needed tall walls around our base. Living in the open in this cursed land was gambling with death every day. After resting, I sent teams of 5 to scavenge anything useful from the ruined village. Nightfall Domain needed everything: pots, pans, even scraps of wood. Then Ashina came back from scouting with interesting news. She'd found strange plants glowing green with magical energy in a farmhouse courtyard. We went to look. The courtyard had stone walls instead of cheap fences, so it was well preserved. Inside, small green sprouts were shimmering with faint light, like tiny sparks of life in this dead world. "Looks like baby bok choy," I said, and poked one with my finger. A weird smell hit my nose. I sneezed violently. Then things went wrong fast. My head started spinning, my forehead throbbed, sweat poured from my skin, and my body started reacting on its own. I caught Ashina's scent. She smelled incredible. Before I could stop myself, my hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Apparently, I tackled Ashina and buried my face in her neck. That plant had completely hijacked my brain. I had zero control over my body. My hands were going places they absolutely should not have been going. Ashina was panicking but couldn't push me off too hard because her God-chosen strength might actually hurt me. She had to simultaneously resist the sensations, control her divine power from going haywire, and deal with my wandering hands. Eventually, she bit her tongue to snap herself back to clarity and broke free. When the guards came looking for me, she used her divine energy to tap my forehead and purge the plant's effect. I woke up dizzy with no memory of what happened. Ashina's face was redder than a tomato, pretending to casually admire the scenery. When I reached for the plant again to study it, she nearly had a heart attack. "You already researched it," she whispered frantically, then told me everything I'd done. I was mortified. "What a perverted plant," I said. "What do you mean, what a pity you can't remember?" She sputtered. Then she accidentally let slip something about, "If you want me, you don't need a plant too," before clamping her mouth shut. She wanted to burn every last sprout. But I stopped her. "Think about it. If we give this stuff to livestock, breeding cattle and sheep becomes effortless. More animals means unlimited meat." Ashina stared at me wide-eyed. "That's so weird. You can't crossbreed. I mean, cows and horses can't, but humans and subhumans can?" "Wait, that's not what I burst out laughing. The plant had completely scrambled her brain. She couldn't string a sentence together without embarrassing herself. Since God-chosen have strong magic resistance, I had Ashina carefully collect 3 samples with soil into jars, safe for her to handle. The rest of our loot from Rum Village was pitiful: 21 silver and 87 copper coins, 1 usable chair, a box, some broken pots, and firewood stripped from collapsed houses. The village had been raided by both humans and beastmen during the war years ago. The trip back was smooth. When we reached our territory, I was pleasantly surprised. The farmland was completely cleared. No more squirming tentacles or flesh blobs. Just toxic soil and ash from the burned creatures. The slaves had done their job and were beaming, hoping for payment. I confirmed everyone would be rewarded. Next priority: fix up the winery. Replace rotten wood, patch collapsed sections, clean out the monster stench. The place leaked wind everywhere and smelled like creature urine. Even my room, supposedly the best spot in the territory, was miserable. Then I hit a wall. When I asked for carpenters, stonemasons, or blacksmiths, complete silence. Not a single skilled worker among my people. Chow reminded me that craftsmen were all free citizens controlled by guilds and local lords. You couldn't just hire them with money, and nobody would willingly come to a cursed death zone. "The nearest city is Maple City in Highfort Province," I said. "I'll go there personally to recruit." Chow, as usual, said it was impossible. And as usual, I ignored him. He was great at pointing out problems, but terrible at solving them. I came up with a marketing plan for the wine. We'd sell it as treasure recovered from a cursed land guarded by monsters, which was technically true, even if the monsters had zero interest in wine. Ashina laughed at the comparison to dragon's treasure. "Even a boot found in a dragon's lair becomes a dragon-guarded boot," I said. I assigned everyone 3 days of cleanup work at the winery, hauling out rubble, rotten equipment, and collapsed stones, for 20 copper coins each. Everyone called me generous. Outside Nightfall Domain, most free citizens couldn't earn that much in a month. But to me, the money was circular. I needed these slaves to become free citizens fast, because free people marry, have kids, learn skills, and pay taxes. Then something unexpected happened. A wave of invisible power flowed into my body. No combat boost, but I could feel the difference immediately. I'd become a first-rank lord. A status panel appeared. Name, field class, lord territory, Starite winery, and surrounding farmland God-chosen. Ashina population, 217. Development, 1, nothing. Happiness, -32. Depressed. Environment, -89. Heavily corrupted. God-chosen probability. 1 in 100 billion. My lord talents included my minimap and the ability to see creature stats. Both I'd had before. But the new one was huge. Prosperity field. It could push back the death fog and accelerate the cleansing of corruption within my territory. Ashina's contract also gave me bonus talents. Beast taming, which made it easier to raise war beasts in my territory, and ennoblement, which could upgrade 50 wolf cavalry to first rank. I couldn't stop grinning. Ashina asked what was so funny, and I told her I'd thought of something amusing. Then I ordered the fog lanterns extinguished. Everyone panicked, thinking I'd lost my mind. But when the lanterns went dark and the fog didn't creep in at all, the panic turned to wild celebration. This was the real game changer. Fog lanterns cost 25 gold each and lasted only a month. Without my ability, we'd go bankrupt just keeping the lights on. Now we had a permanent foothold. Extra rations tonight. Meat soup and 2 breads for everyone, I announced. Saving 1 lantern meant saving 25 gold. That's 250,000 black breads worth. My maid Scissors shouted that this was incredible news and that she'd dreamed of her grandmother smiling at her. I was so pleased I ordered honey cakes for all the servants too. Chow protested that we were running low on honey cakes, but I overruled him. Scissors looked ready to claw his face off. That evening, I sat by a creaky window studying a book called Grey Fog and Death by a famous imperial scholar named Lucas, who'd explored the northern provinces years ago. It cost me 10 silver coins. His journal was something. He wrote about entering the cursed north with 2 royal 5th-rank God-chosen and a ruined nobleman's God-chosen daughter, then immediately commented on how beautiful all 3 women were. He described the Batwomen monsters we'd been fighting. Apparently, they were corrupted prostitutes, identifiable by their tattoos and jewelry. Then he casually mentioned that one of his guards had captured a Batwoman and tested the waters with her. He called the guard brave and full of explorer's spirit. I spat out my apple slice laughing. This scholar was absolutely unhinged. I was laughing so hard at that explorer's journal that I nearly choked on my apple. The guard who'd tested the Batwoman monster ended up dying from infection in his lower body. It turned into a disgusting tumor. The scholar concluded that only God-chosen could resist corruption. But I disagreed. The green plants from Rum Village proved that at least some vegetation could survive too. Lucas was more adventurer than scientist. Then a scream outside shattered my evening. I checked my map. No skull icons. So it wasn't monsters. I figured some slave couldn't control himself and had attacked someone. That kind of thing happens when you cram desperate people together. But my manservant Clay Pot came pounding on my door, shaking so badly he could barely speak. Bandits. Armed bandits attacked the territory. They killed 2 slaves with spears and kidnapped a woman, then retreated into the fog. That last part caught my attention. They retreated. That meant they were intelligent. In this godforsaken cursed wasteland, I was being raided by thinking enemies. Could it be my stepmother or siblings sending assassins? If they'd learned about Ashina, that would be very dangerous. I checked the map again. Nothing. That told me my map had limited detection range for non-corrupted beings. It had picked up Connor's cavalry only when they got close. So the map was better at tracking monsters and God-chosen from far away, but regular enemies could slip through. I grabbed my sword and rushed downstairs. Ashina was already examining the bodies. She apologized for letting enemies into the territory, but I told her it wasn't her fault. We didn't even have walls yet, and she'd been fighting all day. I crouched down to inspect the corpse. The stab wound in the abdomen angled upward, meaning the attacker was very short. Dwarves maybe, Ashina suggested. That actually made me feel better. If these weren't humans sent by my family, the situation was less dire. I asked if her dragon wolf could track the enemy by scent, basically using a legendary beast as a bloodhound. Ashina smacked her forehead. Why didn't I think of that? I'm coming with you, I said through gritted teeth. I want to see what dared attack my territory, and I'm going to chop their heads off. The wolf sniffed the bodies and pointed northeast. Good, not south toward human civilization, which supported the theory that these weren't my family's agents. A dozen guards stumbled out half-dressed, still pulling on armor, rubbing sleep from their eyes. I wanted to yell at them, but held back. I couldn't expect modern military discipline from medieval slaves. But combat readiness training was going on the to-do list immediately. A lazy army can't protect anything. I left them to guard the base and climbed onto the dragon wolf behind Ashina. The wolf's back was surprisingly comfortable, the scales automatically flattened smooth. We shot into the fog like a subway train, wind screaming past our ears. 4 minutes later, Ashina found the enemy in a dense, corrupted forest. I can see them, Ashina said, her red eyes glowing with magic. She could see through the fog. I couldn't. Everything ahead of me was just a white blur. The attackers were resting in a clearing, doing horrible things to the female slave's body. She died from breathing the death fog during transport, but they'd still stripped and abused her corpse. Ashina described them as short creatures, like dwarves but thinner. We crept closer, and I carefully drew my sword. Crush them, I whispered. The dragon wolf howled, shattering the silence. My map instantly filled with red exclamation marks, confirming my theory that non-corrupted living enemies only show up when they become hostile toward me. They threw javelins at us, but the wolf dodged easily. Since they could clearly see us in the fog, hiding was pointless. I lit the fog lantern and finally saw them clearly. Goblins, but not normal ones. These had dead white eyes and yellowish skin. Gray fog goblins, evolved to survive the death mist. That was bad news. It meant an entire species had adapted to live in this toxic wasteland. The dead slave girl's body was covered in tiny tumors from the corruption. One glance nearly made me pass out. I have serious issues with clustered holes and bumps. Leave one alive. Kill the rest, I ordered. Ashina let loose. Her wolf plowed through the 30-plus goblins like a bowling ball through pins. She skewered them with her lance one after another, sometimes taking out multiple goblins per thrust. Blood pooled in every low spot on the ground. I even managed to cut down a few fleeing ones myself from the wolf's back. We left one survivor and followed it at a distance. A terrified creature always runs home. It led us through a corrupted forest to a camp hidden in writhing thorn bushes. This was the Black Forest tribe, about 100 goblins, though weaker than the raiding party we'd just destroyed. The goblin chief was apparently a descendant of the beastmen army that had invaded the empire years ago. When the humans unleashed the death fog and wiped out everything, most died, but goblins were tough enough to evolve and survive. The chief had been fantasizing about someday breaching human walls and capturing women for breeding. His fantasy ended abruptly when a 2-meter-tall dragon wolf appeared at the edge of camp. The chief screamed at the fleeing goblin for leading enemies straight home. I scanned the camp. 100 goblins, all weaker than the ones we'd already slaughtered. I wondered briefly what they ate, corrupted plants? But this wasn't the time for biology class. Burn them all, I said coldly. They attacked my people. They're done. These weren't harmless little creatures. They were an intelligent species that had adapted to the fog, could raid my territory at will, and would keep coming back. This called for total elimination. The dragon wolf's throat scales vented steam, then a wall of fire exploded into the goblin camp. Corrupted plants shriveled instantly. Goblins caught in the flames twisted and screamed. The ones who weren't hit directly ran around in blind panic. It reminded me of pouring hot water on an anthill as a kid. The goblin chief led a desperate charge with 7 or 8 loyal fighters. Ashina didn't even bother directing the wolf. She just pulled her bow and shot them down one by one. Silver streaks of light, and every goblin dropped before they could even decide whether to flee. The whole camp was reduced to cracked earth and white bone ash in minutes. I noticed the goblins had been wearing armor, rusted beyond use, but clearly not goblin-made. I picked up what turned out to be a royal shoulder plate being worn as a helmet. It crumbled into rust flakes when I flicked it. No value at all. No such thing as Antiques, in this era. Ashina pointed out something important. There were no goblin babies in the camp. That meant a hidden nursery somewhere nearby. I ordered a thorough search. I wasn't going to leave behind a vengeful tribe that could rebuild in a month. We found the den under some thorny bushes. The entrance was small, but the inside was spacious, packed with junk and rusted weapons. 100 or so baby goblins, each the size of a weasel, were huddled together. Next to them were 2 deformed female deer. They're mothers. Goblins have no females of their own, so they breed with other species, and they breed fast. What alarmed me was that these goblins had figured out how to use corrupted animals for reproduction. Corrupted creatures were everywhere in the north. If goblins could mass-produce offspring this way, they'd become a serious threat. I picked up a rusty mace from the ground and went to work like I was playing whack-a-mole. Ashina helped with her sword. We eliminated every last one, including the deer. Among the junk, I found a locked ironwood chest. I looked around for a key, but Ashina just smiled, grabbed the lock, and ripped it off with her bare hand. God-chosen strength, impressive. Inside were 2 old flags, one faded imperial griffin banner, and another with an iron hexagram design I didn't recognize, probably some noble family's crest. Below the flags were sealed wooden tubes. I pried one open carefully and found a rolled-up parchment scroll. Ashina got excited, hoping it was a treasure map or royal secrets. But the moment she looked at it, her ears drooped. I can feel magic flowing through it. It's not a treasure map. It was a magic scroll. I recognized the style. My sister had brought one home from the Mage Academy to show off. The parchment was covered in incomprehensible symbols with a fire emblem on the seal. My hands were itching to try it out. I aimed at one of the dead, corrupted deer and tore the scroll open. A burst of fire shot out of the scroll and set the deer corpses ablaze. And that was it. No spectacular explosion, no devastating blast like Ashina's dragon wolf could produce. Just a campfire-level flame. The used scroll turned into worthless paper. I think I just wasted 10 gold coins, I muttered, breaking into a cold sweat. Ashina stuck out her tongue and smiled. It wasn't a waste. Now we know how powerful magic scrolls are. Like you said, practice brings knowledge. Smart girl, always giving me a way to save face. The chest contained 24 scrolls total. Minus the one I'd wasted, the remaining 23 could sell for around 230 gold coins. Not bad for a goblin cave raid. Back at the territory, everyone was relieved to see me alive. If I died, they'd all be killed by the death fog within hours. The free villager dog Paw recognized the goblin head I brought back and confirmed what they were. I told everyone the threat had been eliminated, and the crowd erupted in gratitude. Having a lord who actually avenged dead slaves was apparently unheard of. But the goblin attack had exposed a serious problem. My guards' discipline was terrible. The patrol guards had been sleeping somewhere instead of watching. The rest didn't even bother coming out when the attack happened. If my manservant Clay Pot hadn't woken a few of them, the entire territory could have been wiped out before anyone showed up. The next morning, after eating bread with blueberry jam, I assembled every soldier. Stand straight, I barked. They all looked terrified, expecting whippings or hangings. I'd considered 30 lashes for the worst offenders. But looking at their skeletal bodies, visible ribs, barely able to stand in armor, I realized that would just kill them, waste my healing potions, and leave me with even fewer soldiers. I thought about it honestly. They got 2 small pieces of black bread a day, no pay, no freedom, no wives. Would I try hard in their position? No. Patrol guards, 6 laps around the territory in armor with weapons. Everyone who didn't come out last night. 3 laps. No cheating. They exhaled with visible relief. Some actually smiled. Running was paradise compared to the whip. One guy cheerfully started removing his armor. I love running, he said. Keep your leather armor on. And carry your weapons, I added. Before the groaning started, I dangled the bait. Anyone who finishes before noon gets a slice of smoked meat. Smoked meat? The complaints evaporated instantly. They threw on their gear and sprinted off like madmen. The slaves working the fields stopped to stare at the spectacle. The dozen soldiers who'd actually responded to last night's alarm stayed behind. Wildcat nervously asked if they could run too, for the meat. I told them no running was needed. They were the ones who'd done the right thing, so they'd earned their meat already. Instead, I had a new exercise for them, standing at attention. Military posture training. Do it well, and they'd get a bonus egg. The sound of 50 throats swallowing at the mention of egg echoed across the field. Last time I gave the soldiers eggs, some of them swallowed them whole, without chewing, and nearly choked to death. They'd been dreaming about that taste ever since. Now I was dangling another egg in front of them. I demonstrated the military standing posture from Chinese student military training back on Earth. Feet apart at an angle, hands flat against the sides, back straight, chin up. Then I went around correcting each person individually. These were my best soldiers, the future backbone of my army. Hold this for 30 minutes. Then the egg is yours. Iron Hammer tried his best, standing rigid with his, but awkwardly sticking out. He figured this must be some noble entertainment, making soldiers look like clowns. But hey, for an egg, anything was worth it. He changed his mind fast. The soft, muddy ground made balancing difficult, and within minutes everyone's legs were trembling like noodles. The aching, numbness, and heaviness made it feel like hauling rocks all day. Iron Hammer was drenched in sweat, silently chanting, for the egg, to keep going. I sipped my tea and smiled. Food motivation is unbeatable. When time was up, they collapsed like wet noodles. Beautiful. My butler Chow arrived with his wine cellar report, saw the soldiers lying on the ground, and assumed I'd figured out the noble art of creative torture. He was thrilled. You understand the power of discipline? I asked, momentarily excited that Chow might actually get it. Discipline? I mean, you should keep finding new ways to torment slaves so they stay obedient, he said. Never mind. I slumped back in my chair. When I told him the soldiers were getting eggs as a reward, he nearly fainted. He swore that in the entire empire, no noble had ever done anything so absurdly wasteful as feeding eggs to slaves. Then he gave me the wine inventory. 3 barrels of barley beer, 7 of mead, 7 of olive wine, 24 of black pearl grape wine, and, the real prize, 1 barrel of sparkling wine, basically champagne. Far better than I'd expected. I jumped up pacing with excitement. We need to convert all of this into gold coins immediately. 1 monster raid, and we lose everything. I told Chow to prepare supplies for 40 people for 10 days. I was going to Maple City in Haifort Province personally to sell the wine and recruit craftsmen. Chow objected, saying it was too dangerous and suggesting Ashina go instead. I shut that down immediately. If Ashina died out there, I couldn't hold the winery. And without my map guiding the route, she'd crash straight into corpse hordes. On top of that, sending a god chosen to negotiate would broadcast to the entire empire that a weak, friendless little baron possessed this priceless asset. My stepmother would send assassins within the week. I couldn't lose Ashina, and I couldn't reveal her existence. That's an order. Just execute it, I told Chow. Then I noticed 2 female slaves whispering to each other and walking toward the edge of the territory, probably sneaking off to slack. I'm an expert at recognizing that behavior from my previous life. I noticed 2 female slaves, 1 human, 1 subhuman, walking together toward the edge of the territory. I thought it was heartwarming that the 2 races were becoming friends, so I quietly followed them, thinking I could use them as a positive example. Then they both squatted down and relieved themselves right there on the path. In broad daylight. No shame whatsoever. What the hell? My eyes, I shouted. Chow didn't even flinch. This is normal, he said, picking his nose. Commoners are filthy. He explained that across the entire empire, people defecate everywhere. Streets, hallways, stairways. Even my own maids go in the corners of the building because they're scared of the dark outside. I'd been so busy with territory management that I'd forgotten. This is the medieval era. Terrible hygiene caused the Black Death back on Earth, and I wasn't about to let that happen here. I immediately created a new law: no public defecation. All waste goes into designated pits. First 3 violations get warnings. After that it's a fine, 1 copper for slaves, 3 for free citizens. Chow's eyes lit up. He called me an economic genius and said I'd invented a brand new tax that no lord had ever thought of. He was genuinely delighted, comparing it favorably to the breathing tax and blinking tax other lords had created. He bowed deeply and called me a model nobleman. That was absolutely not my intention, but whatever gets him to enforce it. I continued training the soldiers until noon, then met with Ashina, who'd been out clearing the barn area. She'd wiped out all the corpses there, but the barn itself was mostly collapsed and the grain was completely corrupted. Nothing salvageable. Over the past week, I'd developed a clear system. Ashina handled heavy combat solo. Her speed and power meant regular soldiers just slowed her down. The guards trained and cleaned up small groups of stragglers. I supervised everything and occasionally gave Ashina ear and tail massages as stress relief. We'd expanded the territory about 5,000 square meters eastward into the forest. Not even one soccer field, but it was real progress. The process was slow. Use fog lanterns to push back the mist, kill the corpses, have slaves remove all corrupted material. Then my lord ability would permanently protect that land. And we had to make sure no new corrupted creatures wandered back in. The territory had zero food production. Our supplies were draining fast, and farming wouldn't produce results for a long time. Trade was our only option. Time to go to Highfort Province, I said, putting down my quill pen. Downstairs, Wildcat and the guards were standing at attention, still a bit crooked and messy, but a massive improvement from a week ago. The extra food I'd been giving them was working. They weren't walking skeletons anymore. Wildcat asked to come along as my shield. I was touched but told him I needed him to protect the territory. For this trip, I was bringing Iron Hammer and 2 other guards as personal escorts, plus Ashina and all 20 of her raiding cavalry. A god-chosen and 20 riders made for a solid traveling force. After giving detailed defense instructions, I headed out. Wildcat watched me leave and said to the others that I was a true noble, a merciful lord with the courage to repeatedly venture into the death fog personally. Back at the territory, my people were actually worried about me. Chow wasn't concerned about the journey, though. He was worried about what would happen in Maple City. Apparently, the local god-chosen there is called the Exquisite Dancer, a woman who rose from a brothel to become a god-chosen of the god of love and pleasure. She'd seduced countless nobles into surrendering their wealth and other things. Chow was convinced I was heading into a honey trap, especially after he'd caught me spying on women using the toilet, which was absolutely not what happened, but try explaining that to a medieval butler. Ashina offered again to go in my place. I told her no. I didn't want her risking her life over gold coins, and I needed to personally build a relationship with the Maple Baron for future trade. What I didn't tell her was that without my map, any trade convoy would blunder straight into corpse hordes repeatedly. We set out with a solid group. Ashina and her dragon wolf, 20 raiding cavalry, 3 personal guards including Iron Hammer, 20 slaves to haul cargo, and my maid Scissors to handle my daily needs. We brought 10 barrels of black pearl wine and a chest of aging magic scrolls. The road through the cursed lands was miserable, corrupted surfaces with small tentacles slowing down our carts. I made a mental note to eventually build a proper road connecting Nightfall Domain to Maple Territory. The corpse attacks started almost immediately. Ashina charged ahead on her wolf, mowing down waves of undead with her spear and fire breath. The raiding cavalry followed up. The subhuman riders were natural horsemen and had picked up riding skills remarkably fast during their short training. My map let me steer us around the worst hordes, though we still had to fight through several smaller ones. When we finally passed through Maple Fortress's border gate, the world opened up, bright sky, clean air, no more endless gray fog. It felt like escaping from hell. The border soldiers were stunned to see riders emerging from the death fog, covered head to toe in black cloaks stained with corrupted blood. They assumed we were adventurers or an Imperial investigation unit. The commanding officer simply welcomed us and wished us pleasant shopping. No bribes needed. I'd prepared a bag of gold coins for nothing. I exhaled with relief. I thought they'd give us trouble. Now I just needed to find the Maple Baron and turn my wine into gold. If I could establish a permanent trade route, I wouldn't have to make this terrifying journey every time. Ashina was exhausted from fighting our way through the fog, so she curled up in the wagon and slept. I had all the subhumans wear black cloaks to hide their ears and tails. In the Empire, any visible subhuman is assumed to be a slave, and I didn't want attention. After another day of travel from the border fortress, we reached Maple City, a beautiful mountain town and the Empire's most famous pleasure district. The city walls were a joke, only 3 meters high, decorated with flowers and silk banners instead of soldiers. The few guards on duty were drinking and leering at passers-by. But the Mage Towers and Adventurers Guild were impressive. Merchants and travelers packed the roads. Street vendors sold booze, tobacco, and snacks right outside the gates. Everyone in the Empire knows what Maple City is, a place that'll take anything you've got, money, magic, or military force, and give you a good time in return. Gambling, food, women, you name it. The only people not welcome are those with empty pockets. A crowd of homeless vagrants squatted by the gate, including ruined nobles who'd gambled everything away. The moment we entered the gates, a woman in very little clothing approached my soldiers, offering her services for 10 silver coins. My men turned red and started drooling. Even I was caught off guard. This was right at the city entrance. Maple City lived up to its reputation. My maid Scissors turned bright red and said she'd rather face corrupted monsters. Ashina poked her head out of the wagon and gave me a judgmental look. Going to have fun first? We can wait. I'm not that kind of person, I said defensively. Iron Hammer was practically vibrating. He'd saved 47 silver coins and was desperate to spend them. I told him to keep saving. This wouldn't be our last visit. Earn your freedom first, then enjoy yourself. I sent Ashina and the cavalry to buy food and rest at a roadside inn, then headed to the Maple Estate alone with my trade goods. Baron Simon Maple had built his manor right in the city center. Unusual for a noble, but he loved the noise and crowds. A woman in what was basically a silk swimsuit greeted me at the gate with a deep bow that showed off everything she had. She led me inside. The interior was steamy and smoky. For a moment I thought I was back in the death fog. Then I heard giggling. 7 or 8 naked women were splashing around in a hot spring pool. My blood pressure spiked, not from desire, but from fear of accidentally offending the Baron's wife. A deep, slightly silly voice called out, "Hey, Field, don't be shy. Those ladies are for you. Help yourself." My first thought, this guy's generous. My second thought, this is a trap. If I slept with one of his servants and she got pregnant, Imperial law would give the child inheritance rights to my territory. Maple territory would effectively take over Nightfall domain through joint rule. Classic noble scheme. The servant girl leading me even tried to undress me right there. I pulled away, straightened my robes, and spoke firmly. "Thank you for the hospitality, Baron Simon, but I'm here to visit you and discuss business." I knew all about the exquisite dancer, his famous god-chosen with seduction powers. I wasn't about to get drained of everything I owned and dumped on the street like those homeless nobles at the gate. Besides, after seeing Ashina's beauty every day, these ordinary women didn't do much for me. Baron Simon Maple greeted me with flattery about my father and the Rose family's legendary god-chosen. He was a short, pale, fat man covered in freckles and skin bumps, lounging between 2 naked servants. He'd spit cherry pits onto their bare skin while they giggled. Absolutely decadent, but not my problem as long as he bought my wine. We exchanged the usual noble pleasantries. He was impressed that I'd survived the cursed lands and offered to introduce me to underground banquets featuring elves and mermaids. The previous batch had been cooked and sold to other nobles. I felt sick, but kept my poker face. Before showing the wine, I set the stage. I had Iron Hammer bring in the skull of the giant rat monster from the winery. The thing was as big as a man's torso, with horns and razor teeth. Then I spun a dramatic story. I told Simon the creature had been a terrifying rat demon, with purple magic flames on its fur and claws that could shred heavy armor. I said it burned 7 of my knights to charcoal in its first attack and rampaged through my formation 7 times. I described the hopelessness of watching my trained knights die, until finally the goddess answered my prayers and struck the beast with divine lightning, giving my men an opening to kill it. Simon ate it up. He made a prayer sign on his chest and called my survival a miracle. Then I casually mentioned that this clever demon had been guarding something precious, barrels of black pearl grape wine, extinct for 10 years. The same wine once served exclusively at imperial royal banquets. Simon's eyes practically popped out of his head. Let me see it immediately. Nobles can't resist rare things, and my story had just multiplied the wine's perceived value tenfold. When we cracked open a barrel and the rich aroma filled the room, Simon tasted it and went into ecstasy. He told me his father had saved 1 bottle for years and only let him drink a single glass on his birthday last year. Now here were 10 full barrels. "I found a kindred spirit," he declared. "I'll buy them all." Even in modern times, people love products with a story. I risked my life fighting a demon in a cursed land to bring you this wine. Beats. I found some old barrels in a cellar, any day. He consulted with his advisors and offered 500 gold coins per barrel. 500. Exactly what my father had given me to start Nightfall Domain. For context, ordinary wine sells for roughly 26 gold per barrel. He was offering nearly 20 times the normal price. The extinct for a decade, guarded by a demon, story was doing serious work. The deal went incredibly well. 10 barrels of Black Pearl wine sold for 500 gold coins, about 50 each. At auction they'd fetch around 550 per barrel, but after the auction house's cut and taxes, I'd only net about 400. Selling directly to a noble meant zero taxes. This was the better deal. Simon also bought the rat monster skull I'd brought as a trophy for 20 gold coins. I put on a pained expression like I was parting with something precious, but honestly that thing was worthless to me. Ashina had killed it in under 3 minutes. I told Simon it still carried traces of divine power, which made him even happier. Total haul from this trip, 5,020 gold coins. Absolutely insane. But I wasn't stupid enough to carry all that gold through the death fog. I deposited 3,000 coins in the Imperial Vault in Maple City for a 30-coin fee. This showed Simon I planned to keep doing business here, and it protected me from getting robbed on the way home. I had no doubt Simon was already scheming to get his money back. Sure enough, after spending all that gold, Simon got desperate. He grabbed my arm and tried dragging me upstairs, promising me his city's greatest treasure. I knew exactly what he meant. His god-chosen, the exquisite dancer, the seductress who drained countless nobles dry. I dodged the trap and changed the subject. Do you have giant wolves for sale? I need a large batch. Simon said wolves were rare, only found in the nomadic territories. I explained that horses were useless in the corrupted north because tentacles and corrupted plants snagged their hooves. Wolves handle rough terrain much better. My lord ability could upgrade 50 wolf cavalry to first-rank warriors in one go, but I needed actual wolves first. Plus, I wanted to preserve the dragon wolf's bloodline for breeding. That genetic treasure was priceless, just like how the imperial family bred their famous griffins from the founding emperor's divine griffin. Simon agreed to have his merchants search for wolves, even pups. I figured once he actually found them, I'd be his only buyer, so I could negotiate the price down later. I'm heading back to the north, I told him. Fortune and glory are calling. I left quickly. What I didn't see was Simon practically crying over his lost gold coins as he shuffled to a guest room where the exquisite dancer was waiting. She was disappointed it wasn't me who walked in. The two of them discussed me. She thought I was a cute little boy she wanted to obtain, and theorized I might have unusual tastes since I'd resisted all the women they threw at me. She told Simon to send me a formal invitation to Maple City's underground masked ball in 3 months. It was apparently a place that catered to every desire, a trap designed to discover my weaknesses and exploit them. Simon doubted I'd survive that long in the north. Luck doesn't last forever, he said. Plenty of God-chosen have died in that wasteland. Little did they know, I had a cheat map that made the difference between life and death out there. But their scheming told me one thing clearly. I needed to be very, very careful dealing with Maple City in the future. After leaving Simon's estate, I felt the sunlight ease my nerves. The money problem was solved. Now I needed supplies and people. Nightfall Domain soil was still weak even after removing the corruption, so farming would produce very little. I planned to build a livestock farm, chickens, ducks, pigs, cattle. Their manure would also help restore the soil. Prices varied wildly between cities. In Maple City, slave prices were high and mostly women and children were available. Strong men cost 3 times more than women. Food and animal feed were my biggest expenses. My territory produced nothing, so I was basically paying to keep everyone alive out of my own pocket. Any other noble would have given up on such a money-losing operation. But before shopping, I needed to recruit talent. My entire territory had exactly 2 literate people, and Chao's management skills were mediocre at best. I also desperately needed craftsmen to repair the winery. I sent Iron Hammer to drop off the gold at the inn, then headed to the tavern, the medieval version of a job market. The place was packed and loud. My noble clothes and armed escorts made everyone go silent when I walked in, probably thinking I was hunting a fugitive. I ordered 3 beers, tossed out some silver coins with a generous tip, and the room relaxed. I asked the bartender for news. First big story. Someone had stolen military equipment from Baron Bull's fortress. Count Nibelungen was investigating and reported over 2,000 sets of armor missing. I'd only taken about 500. The Count was clearly inflating the number to skim off the top for himself. That was actually good news for me. If he'd reported the real number, he'd be seriously hunting the thief. But padding the Count meant he'd just grab some random bandits as scapegoats. Second story, a 5th-rank divine artifact called the Eye of Desire had been stolen from the Imperial Palace. It could control people's minds and was linked to heretics who were currently conquering the Eastern continent. The Purple Gold Empire's capital had been under siege for a month. Interesting, but irrelevant to me. I wasn't touching 5th-rank artifacts. Then I told the bartender what I actually needed. Not assassins or mercenaries, but people with useful skills, management, construction, herbalism, craftwork. He was surprised. Nobles usually recruited other nobles' children as squires for management roles. But he did know someone, a former prison warden named Tate. The man could read and write, had refused bribes, and tried to uphold justice, which got him framed by his own subordinates and fired. Now he was sitting alone in the corner, drowning his sorrows. An honest, literate administrator who got screwed over for doing the right thing? That sounded exactly like what I needed. I nodded. The bartender also recommended a guy called Horse Hunter Doom, a lunatic who'd snuck into a lord's stable at night and violated a stallion. Then he talked his way out of a hanging. The bartender suggested I hire him as a diplomatic advisor. I almost flipped the table. No way was I letting that freak anywhere near my war horses. Tell me about Tate, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. I sat down across from the former prison warden. He was a tough-looking middle-aged man with a thick beard. I introduced myself directly. I'm Field, Lord of Nightfall Domain. I need someone who can read, write, manage people, and keep an eye on things. Tate said he could read and write, learned from a monk as a child, but only knew how to manage prisoners. I offered triple his old salary. He refused, saying he had a wife, daughter, and mother, and the north was certain death. I pushed back. You think staying here is safer? You got fired for being honest. Your old enemies and the local gangs are probably already planning revenge against your family. His face went red with fury. I'd hit the nerve I was aiming for. After some more persuading, I convinced him that a cursed wasteland might actually be safer than a corrupt city full of people who wanted him dead. I tested his knowledge for about 15 minutes, then laughed and put a gold coin on the table as a signing bonus. He couldn't believe it. I told him to meet me at the inn by tomorrow noon. Next, a woman in very revealing clothes leaned over and said she knew someone I might want to hire. She tried her sales pitch first, offering me a look at her treasure cave for a silver coin. I gave her the silver for information instead and asked her to be serious. She seemed confused by the concept of a gentleman, but told me about a carpenter named Grey Dog with excellent skills who was looking for work. I rushed to the merchant guild, but I was too late. Grey Dog had already been recruited by a man named Kutch, an economic advisor working for my brother Adrian Rose. The same brother who'd murdered the original Field's girlfriend and bragged about it to my face. Then Kutch himself walked in. The moment he saw me, his face drained of color. He grabbed his son's arm and started babbling about ghosts. Apparently, after I entered the north, the entire Rose family had declared me dead. They'd even emptied my old room and thrown a mourning party. That was really just a celebration. I'm not dead yet, I said, walking up to him with a smile. Surprise. Kutch was a polished merchant, expensive clothes, wool cloak, fine leather boots. He recovered quickly and put on a fake smile, saying how delighted he was to see me alive and how my brother missed me often. Sure he did. The brother who'd promised to kidnap and torture anyone I ever loved really missed me. And Kutch couldn't even be bothered to bow properly. I'm also glad to see you, I replied smoothly. My brother's economic advisor. He thumped his chest and offered to help with whatever I needed, claiming Adrian would be happy to assist. I wasn't buying a word of it, but I kept smiling. The real question was whether I could pry that carpenter away from him. I went straight to the point with Kutch. I need a carpenter. You hired Grey Dog. You offered to help, so let me have him. Kutch's smile froze. He'd just been making polite noises and didn't expect me to actually take him up on it. He made excuses about Adrian's territory urgently needing a stable build. I put on my best pathetic face, disappointed, sad, like a kicked puppy. Okay then, my brother comes first. I've always loved him. Inside, I was laughing coldly. But Kutch and his son bought the act completely. The moment I left, I could practically hear them mocking me. Kutch's son called me a sick dog who couldn't even fight for a carpenter. Kutch himself figured I'd probably never entered the north at all and had just run away to Maple City to party. He planned to report my survival to Adrian immediately. A living field rose meant someone who could claim a share of our father's inheritance. Meanwhile, I had shopping to do. I pulled out my list: slaves, fog lanterns, purification potions, fabric, food. Everything was needed. The money I'd just earned was already burning away. Iron Hammer was angry on my behalf about the carpenter situation and offered to beat Kutch up and take Grey Dog by force. I told him to be patient. Let the bullet fly for a while. He didn't understand the expression, but he trusted me. At the church, I went to buy fog lanterns and purification potions. The old priest was ogling a nun when I interrupted him. He reminded me that these weren't purchases. They were offerings and atonement. 25 gold per lantern, 1 gold per purification potion. Highway robbery, but only the church had the recipes. I'd calculated the costs. Clearing 1 acre of farmland required 3 potions, and a fog lantern only lasted 25 days. Just maintaining my territory burned through 20 gold coins daily. Purifying a single well needed 80 potions. I was about to buy everything they had when a big-nosed man barged in and offered to pay 10 gold more than me. The priest's loyalty switched instantly to the more devout customer. I bid 30. He bid 31. I stopped there. 30 extra gold was already insane, and I wasn't sure this guy wasn't a church plant designed to drive up prices. But I wasn't letting this go either. As the man walked away with my supplies, I quietly slipped a small bag of gold coins to one of my guards and whispered instructions. The moment I turned the corner, I heard the big-nosed man roaring with laughter behind me. Then Kutch's son Lance ran out from an alley to congratulate him. They'd set this whole thing up. Lance had hired this guy to outbid me as a prank, using Kutch's money. They were planning to return the goods afterward and get the gold back. They were laughing about how funny my defeated expression was, joking that Lance would put humiliated a nobleman on his tombstone. They felt safe because Adrian's name protected them. After all, Adrian had murdered the original Field's girlfriend and nothing happened. What was I going to do? They planned to follow me around and keep pulling stunts like this. What they didn't know was that I'd already sent my guard after the big-nosed man with very specific instructions. The bullet was about to land. I went to the Mages Guild to sell my magic scrolls. The wizard looked like Gandalf, examined them, and offered 100 gold. I pushed for more, but he explained that magic degrades over time, unlike fantasy novels where ancient means powerful. Here, old magic is just outdated magic. We settled on 150 gold. While browsing, I noticed a familiar figure lurking nearby. The big-nosed guy from the church was back for round 2. I'd been expecting this. I pretended to want a magic book called Feathered Beast Vision, a spell that lets you see through a bird's eyes. 200 gold. Right on cue, Big Nose jumped in with a higher bid. This time, the wizard tried to refuse him since I was first. But I winked at the wizard frantically behind Big Nose's back. The smart old man caught on immediately and played along, accepting the higher bid. I acted furious and grabbed another book. Big Nose outbid me again. Then another. And another. We went back and forth until Big Nose had racked up 1,300 gold coins on my brother Adrian's credit account. He was sweating bullets, but kept going, drunk on the thrill of humiliating a nobleman. Then my guard returned from the errand I'd sent him on earlier. Perfect timing. Fine, you win, I said with a bitter smile and walked out. The moment I left, Big Nose tried to return everything. The wizard's face turned to ice. You used Baron Adrian's name to steal purchases from my customer, and now you want refunds? I'm the chief mage of Maple City. Try that again, and I'll turn you into a sow for the butcher's table. Big Nose begged to at least get back the base prices, eating the markup. The wizard told him Adrian would have to come personally to process any returns. Big Nose stumbled out carrying a mountain of expensive magic books he couldn't afford, muttering about how Lance would get him killed. That's when my other plan kicked in. Earlier, when Big Nose had outbid me at the church, I'd immediately sent my guard to hire some street thugs. The bartender had mentioned a killer named Pockmark who'd murder his own parents for 20 silver. I'd paid them to wait for my signal. A dozen ragged men with rusty knives swarmed Big Nose in the street, screaming about him, sleeping with someone's wife. They stabbed him in the throat before he could scream. Blood sprayed everywhere. His escorts and helpers were butchered too. In his final moments, Big Nose understood everything. I'd hired those killers the instant he'd taken the church supplies from me. He cursed Lands with his last breath for talking him into provoking a nobleman. That's the thing about this world. A noble can have a commoner killed and barely face consequences. A few gold coins to the right people, and the thugs would be out of prison in weeks. Dead men don't pay bribes, but living ones do. Lands watched the whole thing from across the street, holding a cream cake he'd bought to celebrate my humiliation. The cake almost slipped from his frozen fingers. While the crowd screamed and shoved in the chaos, Iron Hammer and my guards casually walked through the mess in their armor and led away the dead man's horses, along with everything loaded on them, including the church supplies he'd bought with my brother's money. From across the street, I watched Lands standing frozen, cream cake in hand, staring in disbelief. I caught his eye, mouthed, "Fun, right?" and drew my finger across my throat. Then I turned and walked away. I was in a fantastic mood. I'd just gained nearly 2,000 gold coins worth of goods, magic books, fog lanterns, purification potions, all bought with my brother Adrian's money. Dropping your worldly morals really does make gold flow faster. The real business lesson? Forget clever strategies. Sometimes you just pay 8 gold coins to some street thugs and solve the problem permanently. My guard confirmed everything went perfectly. He'd hired Pockmark and his crew without ever mentioning my name. I tipped him 2 silver for good work. The next day, Kutch's merchant caravan fled Maple City at dawn. Inside his wagon, I could imagine the scene. Kutch screaming at his idiot son. Lands wanted to report me to Baron Simon for murder, but Kutch shut that down immediately. Accusing a noble is suicide for a commoner. Even if the accusation is true, nobles automatically treat it as slander. The entire aristocratic class would close ranks against them. That's the fundamental truth of this world. Nobles fight each other constantly, but the moment a commoner challenges one of them, they unite like a fist. Crush the peasant first, then go back to fighting over the scraps. It's pure class solidarity. That's why even when I had nothing, no slave or servant dared openly mock me. Kutch told Lands their only option was to get back to Adrian's territory and report that I was alive. As for the 2,000 gold hole in Adrian's accounts, Kutch would figure out whether to cook the books or claim they were robbed. Then their caravan spotted my raiding cavalry, 20 riders in black cloaks with lances, armored in scale and plate, circling their convoy like vultures. They looked like ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings. Kutch nearly had a heart attack. But their escort, a second-rank combat knight named Gareth, wasn't worried. To someone with supernatural fighting power, ordinary cavalry were just bandits. One touch, and they'd die. And that was exactly the problem I needed to solve. I had 20 riders, but they were still just regular soldiers. Against a true combat knight, they wouldn't last a second. A single first-rank knight can take on 5 heavy cavalry. A second-rank knight like Gareth could probably handle all 20 of my riders. Kutch knew this and ordered his caravan to prepare for battle. Gareth charged out eagerly, hungry for glory. But then Ashina's dragon wolf howled from the hilltop, and his warhorse nearly buckled. The massive black-scaled beast appeared on the ridge with Ashina sitting on top in her black cloak. The moment Gareth's combat aura sensed her, it started trembling on its own. It didn't matter what rank a god-chosen was. Even a first-rank combat-type god-chosen could kill a third-rank knight. Gareth knew he was outmatched, but his knight's pride wouldn't let him run. Plus, fleeing would ruin his reputation and future earning potential. For honor, he shouted, and charged with his 5 squires. He tried talking Ashina down, yelling that any god-chosen could live in luxury by serving a noble like Adrian. Why lower yourself to banditry? Ashina didn't even bother answering. The dragon wolf crouched and launched a pillar of fire. Gareth poured white combat aura into his lance and deflected the blast, but the impact made his organs shake. He tried a full-speed lance charge, combat aura wrapped around his entire body and horse like a battering ram. He slammed into Ashina's previous position hard enough to crater the earth. She'd already vanished. The wolf moved like it teleported despite its massive size. So this is what a combat knight feels like, Ashina mused, her wolf ears twitching. Interesting. While those two clashed, my cavalry captain Silver Claw glanced back at me. I nodded. He raised his lance and screamed the charge. 20 riders in full armor thundered toward the caravan. They'd only trained for a short time, but they'd survived multiple corpse hordes. Human enemies didn't scare them at all. 20 riders somehow generated the momentum of 200. Kutch had positioned the hired workers as a human shield, hoping they'd absorb the cavalry's charge. A sad wall of peasants with crossbows let loose a scattered volley. The arrows pinged harmlessly off my rider's armor. Full plate is terrifyingly effective against arrows. Only one unlucky rider caught a bolt in the shin and fell. Before they could reload, my cavalry smashed into the line. The first crossbowman took a lance to the shoulder. His entire arm disintegrated. The horses behind trampled him into paste. Run! The workers panicked instantly. They'd been hired to haul cargo for bread money, not die as meat shields. Their route crashed into Kutch's own guards, destroying whatever formation remained. The guards lost all will to fight. My wolf's subhuman cavalry were natural horsemen. They drew sabers and slashed downward from the saddle into the chaotic mass. Anyone who fell was simply crushed under hooves without needing a finishing blow. The screaming was terrible, pleas for mercy mixed with war cries. But I watched from the hillside without flinching. Kutch's son had thought it was funny to torment me. Now he was learning what happens when you poke a noble who fights corrupted monsters for a living. The battle was over fast. Gareth fought bravely against Ashina, but a second-rank knight was just too weak for a god-chosen. Ashina stopped playing around and unleashed a barrage of spear thrusts so dense they looked like a river of stars. Gareth took over a dozen hits before he even understood what happened. His squires dropped from their horses simultaneously, dead before they hit the ground. The dragon wolf caught Gareth mid-fall and crunched through his armor like a snack. Apparently humans with combat aura are a nutritional supplement for the beast. My cavalry tore through the rest of the caravan. The hired workers broke instantly, and their panicked retreat destroyed the guards' formation too. My wolf's subhuman riders slashed and stabbed from horseback, trampling anyone who fell. When it was done, I rode over and called a halt. My riders were drenched in blood, radiating killing intent like demons. Soldiers who've tasted real combat are fundamentally different creatures. Casualties on my side: 3 wounded, 2 seriously from falling off horses due to poor riding skills. 0 deaths. Full armor makes an enormous difference. Now I understood why hiding armor was a capital crime in ancient times. 1 silver per head, I announced. Wounded soldiers get full medical care on me. Then Silver Claw dragged Kutch and his son Lands before me. I was wearing my black cloak. A noble caught raiding would never do business again. We meet again, I said, pulling back my hood. Their faces went white. I asked them to tell me everything about my brother Adrian's military strength. After some persuasion, Silver Claw knocked out 3 of Kutch's teeth. Lands spilled everything. Adrian had 1 4th-rank knight, 12 3rd-rank knights, 500 total soldiers, and could raise 3,000 militia in wartime. Most importantly, he had a 2nd-rank god-chosen named Allison, called the Flame Spirit Butterfly, a fast-casting mage who commanded a supernatural mage unit. Terrifying power. The silver lining: Adrian was new to his territory and could only control about 1/10 of those forces. The knights were loyal to our father, not him. Still, he was way beyond what I could challenge right now. Back to farming. I forgive you both, I said, turning my horse away. Then I made a throat-cutting gesture at Silver Claw. Kutch and Land scrambled to their feet and were immediately tackled and stabbed repeatedly. They cursed me to hell with their last breaths. I said I forgave you. I shrugged. I never said my men did. The surviving workers were terrified. A carpenter named Grey Dog, the exact man I'd been trying to hire, had been hiding under cabbages in an overturned cart. He'd wet himself. You've all been recruited, I announced from horseback. Anyone with useful skills, step to the right. Also, which one of you is Grey Dog? Everyone rushed to the right side, even those with 0 skills. Grey Dog jumped out and threw himself at my feet, soaked pants and all. That's me. I'll do anything. I'm the Lord of Nightfall Domain. I heard you're a good carpenter. Work well for me, and your life will be better than it ever was in Maple City. I pointed at the remaining 7 survivors, 4 workers and 3 of Kutch's maids. The old man had more maids than I did. He deserved what he got. My riders started sorting through the loot. When Silverclaw opened a fancy wooden chest and found rows of crystal bottles, I nearly lost it. Combat Aura Potions, Maple City's specialty product. 60 bottles total, each worth at least 50 gold coins. These are what knights need to level up. Useless for God-chosen and useless for me personally since I'd missed the age window for awakening combat aura, but incredibly valuable for trade or building up future knights. After 30 minutes of looting, the total haul was staggering. 60 potion bottles, 327 gold in cash, a second-rank knight's armor and weapons, a card of silk fabric, a chest of healing potions, 12 pack horses, and miscellaneous goods. Estimated value, around 5,000 gold coins. We're family, I said cheerfully. What's his mine? One quick cavalry raid earned as much as my entire dangerous wine trading expedition. Crime really does pay in this world. We returned to the inn outside Maple City where Tate was waiting nervously. He'd sold his house and was terrified I wouldn't show. When he saw me, he cracked a rare joke about almost pocketing the gold coin I'd given him. I laughed and told him he'd have missed out on 10,000. His family came too, an old mother with buck teeth, a plain-looking wife, and a surprisingly beautiful daughter in a blue dress. I greeted them all warmly. With my brother's generous donation, covering fog lanterns and purification potions, I had extra budget for slaves. I bought 200 men, mostly weak and elderly since Maple City's peaceful nature meant strong slaves were scarce and expensive. Then food and animal feed for 3 months, 5 cows, 20 sheep, 2 war horses, 25 pack horses, noble furniture and clothes, and 3 carrier pigeons. Total spending, 1,970 gold. Livestock ate most of it. Animals cost more than people in this era. Tate immediately proved his worth. He organized the slaves into 2 groups based on strength, distributing cargo efficiently so the caravan wasn't a mess. Money well spent. We traveled to the border and camped for the night. The next morning, I stepped out of my tent and found something unexpected. A church expedition camped nearby. 30 holy knights radiating combat aura, plus 20 nuns in conservative robes. My slaves were already kneeling before them while the nuns preached. This world's church isn't some charity collecting donations. They tax kings, excommunicate rulers, launch holy wars, and control 3 wealthy provinces in the south. Over 100 nations officially worship their holy light goddess, also called Mother of all gods, though nobody's actually seen any god. The only proof of divinity is God-chosen. Everything else could be fabricated, and I would know, since I make things up constantly without any guilt. A nun recognized me. Your field rose? You actually survived Nightfall Domain. This must be a miracle. Then a gentle voice came from behind her. A woman in white robes stepped forward with a glowing angel symbol on her forehead, a God-chosen. I'm Eliza, a 3rd-rank God-chosen of the church, she said. We prayed for you when we passed through Rose territory, a 3rd-rank God-chosen. One person could be an entire army at that level. I immediately worried she'd detect Ashina, but Eliza didn't even glance at her. Apparently, God-chosen can shield themselves from each other's detection. That was very good news. I'd already noticed that contracted God-chosen don't show up on my map. Ashina's marker vanished after our contract. So if God-chosen can shield each other's detection, Ashina was safe around Eliza. No wonder I've been so lucky. Beautiful nuns were praying for me, I said, lying through my teeth. The church had never helped me once. Ashina wasn't even their goddess's chosen. She belonged to the winter goddess of the subhumans. Eliza proposed a partnership. The church would build a church and a military camp in Nightfall Domain to help with defense. It sounded generous until I thought about it for 2 seconds. A 3rd-rank God-chosen squatting in my territory? She'd own the place overnight. And where was the church when I first entered this death zone with nothing? Now that I'd carved out a foothold, they smelled opportunity and came running. Thanks, but no, I said. We haven't even stabilized yet. If you want to help, just give us gold and fog lanterns. We'll pray to the goddess every night. She looked disappointed. I offered to travel together so I could use her combat power to clear corpses from my route, free God-chosen protection. She saw right through me and declined, saying monster slaying was their own sacred trial. I asked about their real mission. Eliza explained they were recovering divine artifacts, weapons left behind by God-chosen who died fighting in the north. These artifacts degrade over time, so the church wanted them back before they turned to dust. My eyes lit up. Are there any artifacts in Nightfall Domain? Eliza's expression soured. I quickly put on a compassionate face and offered to help search in exchange for fog lanterns and purification potions. She refused both requests. Artifacts belonged to their goddess, and the lanterns were made from God-chosen, something she wouldn't finish explaining. Production was very limited. Neither of us got what we wanted. She kept pushing for a church in my territory. I kept dangling a vague, someday when we're stable. I wasn't afraid of her. The church's influence was declining, and they couldn't afford to antagonize nobles anymore. But I kept things polite. We parted ways. I organized 50 strong slaves with spears and led my caravan into the fog. The return trip was brutal. 350 people meant a massive, slow-moving target. Corpses attacked relentlessly, bursting from ruins, corrupted forests, even the ground itself. Tate nearly lost his mind the moment he saw his first corpse creature. He'd heard about northern monsters, but hearing and seeing are completely different things. He was about to bolt when he noticed my cavalry drawing their sabers. The blades were caked in dried blood and human fat, clearly used on people very recently, within the last 2 days. That shut him up faster than any monster could. He realized that running from these knights would be far more dangerous than facing the corpses. He immediately started controlling the panicking slaves, keeping order while nervously glancing at his family's wagon. Smart man. He'd figure out quickly which direction the real danger came from. No panicking. Runners will be killed. Silver Claw barked at the slaves, his cavalry forming a ring around the caravan, not to fight the corpses, but to keep the slaves from scattering. Tate was confused. Who was going to handle the monsters? Then the dragon wolf exploded out of nowhere, tearing through the corpse horde like a wrecking ball, claws crushing, fire incinerating. The new slaves stood frozen, too shocked to even be scared. They hadn't known we had a giant wolf hiding in the group. I tapped the stunned Tate on the shoulder and pointed at Ashina in her maid outfit. That's my contracted God-chosen. Now go manage the slaves so we can move. He couldn't form a sentence. My maid Scissors laughed at him. If even I'm not scared, what's a man got to worry about? But I was worried. My map was lighting up everywhere, skull icons swarming from all directions. The corpse activity had massively increased since my last trip. Standing still meant death. Move. Now, I ordered. The journey became a nightmare. Endless waves of corpses charged from the fog, got burned to ash by Ashina's wolf, and were immediately replaced by more. It never stopped. By the time we reached the winery, I'd lost 39 people, 1 warhorse with a broken leg, 2 pack horses bitten to death, and 7 goats I'd used as bait to lure away a horde. Heavy losses. At least the food supplies and cavalry survived intact. Tate's face was black as coal. His wife and daughter tumbled out of the wagon, collapsed on the ground, and just sat there shaking. He definitely regretted coming. Then he saw my castle, a crumbling winery with wind blowing through the walls. His jaw nearly hit the floor. I told him straight, this place is basically a giant prison. The fog is the wall. Almost everyone here is a slave. Your job is to be my domestic advisor, prevent riots, assign work, keep order. It really is like a prison, he muttered. With one difference, I said. These people can earn their freedom. I also want to use some of their work hours for rehabilitation, teaching new skills, breaking bad habits. I looked down at a pile of human waste on the ground and winced. Especially the public defecation problem. My earlier ban clearly hadn't worked. The good news, while I'd been away, the territory hadn't been attacked. The first batch of purified farmland was already being worked. Slaves were digging with hoes and bare hands. No plows, no proper rows, no irrigation ditches. Primitive, but at least the land was being used. We had oxen that could pull plows if I built some. When we rode in, every slave dropped their tools and ran over to kneel. The guards came running too. Chow practically cried when he saw me, terrified I'd either died or abandoned them. Thank the heavens you're back. He looked ready to kiss my horse's hooves. Without me, Everyone in this territory would be dead within days. No lord ability meant no fog protection. I had a lot of work ahead. New slaves to integrate, military training to continue, farmland to expand, the winery to repair, and defenses to build. But we were alive. We had supplies for 3 months, and my territory was slowly growing. All credit goes to Ashina and the brave soldiers, I said. I'd never mentioned my map. That secret was mine alone. Ashina looked tired, dark circles under her beautiful eyes, but her wolf ears gave a satisfied little wiggle. She'd been killing corpses nonstop for days. Lately she'd adopted my calm demeanor in public, saving her playful side for when we were alone. Iron Hammer and the guard stood up ramrod straight the moment I praised them. They'd figured out I liked good posture, so they did it automatically now. May the winter goddess protect our lord. Iron Hammer thumped his blood-crusted fist against his chest plate. Chow was so relieved to see me, he nearly cried. He'd been losing sleep worrying I'd died or abandoned them. I told him to relax. I wouldn't be leaving the territory again for a while. The trip had been exhausting, and Nightfall Domain felt like home now, crumbling walls and all. I gave the cavalry 3 days off, same for Iron Hammer's squad. I had Chow organize food distribution for the new slaves, 2 breads and vegetable soup each. I'd lost over 30 people on the way back, mostly older, slower slaves who couldn't keep up. Every one of them was wasted labor. It stung. Back inside the winery, the air was noticeably cleaner. The maid Sparrow had scrubbed the place thoroughly while I was gone. The stone walls showed their natural color again instead of blackish-purple corruption stains. The indoor defecation problem had stopped too, probably because my authority had grown enough to scare the culprit straight. After dinner and a proper bath, I sank into my new cushioned armchair. The furniture I'd bought in Maple City transformed my room into something actually livable. No more creaking chairs threatening to collapse. I was leafing through a magic book when Tate knocked on my door. He hadn't rested at all. He'd walked every inch of the territory, reeking of sweat, and came to ask about my priorities for governance. Taxes? Population? Food production? I was impressed he'd jumped into work so fast. Earlier, he'd looked ready to quit. People have to face reality, he said plainly. My family is tied to this place now. I'll do everything I can. I don't want my children eaten by corpses. I laid out my real priorities. Not taxes. Not food quotas. Setting targets we couldn't meet was just empty sloganeering. First, reclaim corrupted farmland and buildings. Clear every trace of corruption so my lord ability can permanently shield the land from the death fog. Second, rehabilitate the slaves. Turn them into skilled, obedient workers. Ideally, help them all become free citizens. You managed prisoners. Reforming people should be your specialty. But fair warning, some of these slaves look pitiful, but they're committing crimes behind the scenes. Sort that out first. Even among slaves, there's a pecking order. The strong bully the weak. Being oppressed doesn't make someone noble. Some people are terrible regardless of their situation. Tate stared at me in genuine surprise. Your understanding of management is remarkably clear and forward-thinking. I've never seen anything like it. I laughed. Isn't this basic stuff? Not at all, he said seriously. Most lords only care about this year's taxes, grain output, military strength, or which noble lady to court. You're the first I've met who focuses on the foundation, the people at the bottom. I tapped the desk thoughtfully. He was right that it was unusual here. But back on Earth, this was standard modern thinking. Invest in your people, build from the ground up. The education and wisdom I'd brought from my previous life made ordinary decisions seem extraordinary in this medieval world. Tate brought up housing. Slaves were crammed into tents made of rotten wood and rags, and even the free citizens had no proper homes. I told him it would take time. We needed to reclaim the eastern forest and quarry first. I gave him a spare map and told him to share any ideas. The next morning, Ashina showed up for breakfast wearing a lace-trimmed noble dress I'd bought her in Maple City. She usually wore her maid uniform, but today was her day off. She looked stunning, long white hair loose, red eyes half-lidded and dreamy, white stockings hugging her legs perfectly, feet in slippers swinging lazily. Not the stiff posture of a proper noblewoman, but I liked that she stayed true to her wolf subhuman nature. This was my territory and my rules. She asked if we were going treasure hunting. Finding the wine and magic scrolls had gotten her hooked. I told her no. Today we were going to inspect the grassroots. Grassroots? She blinked at the unfamiliar term. Visit the workers and check how things are going. 2 steps outside the winery, I regretted not riding my horse. The ground was covered in human waste everywhere. My anti-defecation decree had completely failed. I summoned Chow and the unofficial village elder, an old man called Old Turtle Dove. Chow admitted the problem sheepishly. There were too many people, they were too stupid to remember the rules, and the 3 warning system meant hundreds of people each got 3 free passes. Verbal warnings meant nothing to them. He was right. Kindness had backfired spectacularly. Time for the Iron Fist. New rule, effective immediately, I announced. Anyone caught relieving themselves in public gets punished on the spot. Free citizens, 1 copper fine or 1 lash. Slaves, 3 coppers or 3 lashes. No more warnings. Then I ordered children and women among the slaves to collect all the waste daily and pile it in one designated spot. Old Turtledove thought I was crazy. Why go through all that effort for poop? I asked him if they knew about fertilizing crops. He looked completely blank. They knew watering, weeding, and catching bugs. And the most important farming technique of all, praying to the goddess for a good harvest. I almost facepalmed. No wonder this world had constant famines. Even the richest soil gets depleted if you keep planting without putting nutrients back. You need to fertilize, I said, pointing at the fields. Collect the waste, let it decompose, then use it on the crops. Old Turtledove's eyes nearly rolled back into his skull. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. If I weren't a baron, I'm pretty sure he would have punched me. The idea of putting human waste on food crops was apparently the most disgusting thing he'd ever heard. This was going to be a longer conversation than I'd hoped. Old Turtledove nearly had a stroke when I told him to use collected waste as fertilizer. He thought I'd gone insane. Putting filth on the goddess's blessed crops would bring plagues and droughts. He'd farmed his whole life and was absolutely certain he knew better. Chow sided with him, saying only magic and God-chosen could improve crop yields. Everyone just needed to pray harder. This was the fundamental problem with this world. Magic and divine power were real, which made everyone lazy about finding practical solutions. Bad harvest. Must not have prayed enough. Send more money to the church and wait for a miracle. I didn't argue. I simply ordered that all slave-worked fields would follow my methods. Composting waste for fertilizer, ridge-style planting for vegetables, and double-tilling for wheat. The free citizens could farm however they wanted. Their small plots would serve as a comparison. I'd spent part of my childhood in rural China. I knew basic agriculture. Even if my methods didn't work perfectly in this corrupted soil, the loss would be tiny. These fields weren't producing much anyway. After personally showing some slaves how to dig proper ridges, I moved on. Ashina asked if the territory would be covered in wheat and vegetables next year. Hopefully, I said, but not enough for everyone. We'll still need imports. I wish we could grow meat, she said, wiping drool from her lips. Then I tackled the kitchen. My cook, Plate, was planning his usual nightmare menu, apple roasted steak, and his masterpiece, orange almond stewed ham with chili peppers. Last time he'd made that, I needed 5 cups of tea to wash away the taste. The servants all said it was delicious, which just proved they'd never eaten real food. I couldn't cook myself. If a noble touched the stove, the chef would hang himself from shame. So I stood behind Plate and dictated every step for a new dish. Dry pot beef. Heat the oil first, then sear the sliced beef, add onions, mushrooms, radishes, and chilies. No water. Every instruction was a battle against his instinct to throw fruit into everything. Meanwhile, my maid Sparrow was handling the noon food distribution, barley porridge, and black bread from Maple City. Much better quality than the stuff from Golden Eagle City. At least no rocks or sawdust mixed in. The slaves smelled food and stampeded over, abandoning their work. My guards held them back with halberds while Sparrow squeaked orders to form 10 lines. Some tried cutting in line and got punched flat by guards who'd been eating eggs and meat for weeks. Nobody messes with well-fed soldiers. One slave made a crude comment about Sparrow being pretty. Another quickly shut him up. They all assumed she was a noblewoman because of her clean clothes. Being a castle maid had its perks. In the crowd, I later learned there were twin sisters, White Feather and Black Feather, only 11 years old. Their father had been hanged for picking up a stick in a noble's forest. Their mother was assaulted by a militia captain and drowned herself. The girls had been captured as beggars and sold as slaves, eventually ending up in my territory. White Feather was protecting her crying sister from being trampled in the crowd. When she heard the ration, 2 bread loaves and porridge per person per day, she couldn't believe it. In her experience, slaves got 1 bread every 2 or 3 days. She was convinced I'd made a drunken mistake with the orders. She didn't yet understand that Nightfall Domain ran differently. But she would. While I was busy in the kitchen teaching Plate how to make dry pot beef, the noon food distribution was happening outside. I'd ordered 2 bread loaves and a bowl of porridge per person, generous by any standard in this world. What I heard later from Sparrow told me a lot about how things were running. The free villagers handling distribution had tried to shortchange some of the smaller slaves, figuring a child only needed 1 bread every 3 days. Sparrow caught it and stood her ground, repeating what I always say: this is Nightfall Domain. Everything here is new. The guards backed her up with a threatening look, and the villager backed down fast. Good. The system was working. My well-fed soldiers enforced my rules, and the servants I'd empowered carried my authority. But it also showed me that without constant oversight, the people at the bottom would cheat the people even further below them. Human nature doesn't change just because everyone's suffering together. Among the slaves, there were twin sisters, White Feather and Black Feather, 11 years old. I didn't know their story yet at that point, but I'd later learn it was heartbreaking. Their father was hanged for picking up a stick from a noble's forest. Their mother was assaulted by a militia captain and drowned herself. The girls ended up as slaves and eventually in my territory. Like most slaves, the sisters ate 1 bread and saved the other. White Feather told her younger sister they couldn't eat everything at once. Good days don't last, and you never know when the Lord might change his mind. The little one cried about it, but handed over the bread. Almost every slave did the same thing. They didn't trust that tomorrow's meal would come. Even when the Lord is kind, the people below him might not be. Today's stingy villager proved that. Back in the kitchen, I'd finally gotten Plate to follow my instructions for dry pot beef. Hot oil first, sear the sliced meat, then add onions, mushrooms, radishes, and chili. No water, no fruit. He looked at me like I was committing a crime against cooking. When the dish reached my servants' table, they stared at it in horror. Scissors said it looked like dried manure or her aunt who'd burned to death in a fire. No soup, no fruit. How could this possibly be food? But it smelled incredible, and that confused them enough to try it. Meanwhile, Claypot was already planning to report Scissors' insult to me. Sparrow elbowed Scissors and scolded her for disrespecting my gift. Scissors panicked and offered to clean everyone's rooms if they'd forgive her. This was my little world. Guards who'd kill for an egg, servants who'd betray each other for favor, slaves who'd hide bread like treasure, and a cook who thought putting oranges on everything was peak cuisine. Messy, brutal, and deeply human. But slowly, piece by piece, I was turning it into something that worked. My servants discovered the dry pot beef was incredible. Sparrow tried it first and immediately lied, saying it was terrible so she could keep it all. The others saw through her instantly and swarmed the plate. It was gone in seconds. Even Scissors, who'd compared it to dried manure, was licking the dish clean. The cook Plate had a complete meltdown. His entire culinary worldview, fruit goes with everything, had just been shattered. I thought the dish was only okay. Too much salt, wrong temperature, and someone had added sweet curry powder. Ashina couldn't comment because her cheeks were stuffed like a chipmunk. She just gave me a thumbs up. I'd planned to rest for 3 days, but by day 2, I was already restless. The territory produced nothing and was surrounded by danger. Sitting still made me anxious. When I opened my door that morning, Ashina was already there with her bow and spear, splattered in fresh blood. She'd been out clearing corpses on her own. My map showed a new empty zone that was obviously her work. 1 day of rest, and she was fully recovered. God-chosen stamina is unreal. But she had concerning news. Around 3 in the morning, something had been watching our territory. She'd gone out searching multiple times, but found nothing. Whatever it was a corrupted creature with a completely unfamiliar scent that could somehow evade her senses. The wind carried an overwhelming feeling of killing intent and hostility. This wasn't goblins. They couldn't hide from Ashina. This was something new and dangerous. She recommended tightening our defenses, 5-person patrol groups with signal horns. Ashina rarely offered military opinions. She usually just did whatever I asked without comment. The fact that she was volunteering tactical advice told me this threat was serious. She'd faced a third-rank rat monster without blinking, so whatever had spooked her was on another level entirely. I agreed immediately and added that we needed another round of recruitment. Tate could handle that. My priority today was the lumber yard. We desperately needed wood to build defensive walls. I'll protect you with my life, Ashina said solemnly. The lumber yard was east of the winery, at the edge of a forest where it met a lake. The lake had once been a beautiful ribbon connecting the estate to Starite Lake. Now it was gray-black water filled with bones and corrupted white reeds. Purifying it would cost tens of thousands of potion bottles. The corrupted landscape didn't bother me anymore. The small tentacles growing from corrupted weeds, I'd actually started finding them cute. They'd curl up like shy plants when I poked them with my lance. That had become one of my daily amusements. As we approached the lumber yard, my guards fanned out to engage scattered corpses. Wildcat and his men had gotten frighteningly good at this. He crept behind a female corpse, drove his halberd through her neck with a tiny, precise motion, while another guard grabbed the thing's hair and twisted the head right off. Neither of them even flinched. These were the same terrified slaves from a few weeks ago. My people were becoming real soldiers. Wildcat and the guards were clearing corpses like professionals now. Nearly silent, just the faint clink of armor plates. One guard stepped on a corrupted flesh blob and yelped, which drew 3 corpses charging out of the fog. Wildcat didn't even flinch. He rushed forward, gutted the first one with his halberd, trapped the second one's arm, and stabbed it through the throat, then bashed the third one's skull in with his shield. A few weeks ago, this guy was a terrified slave. Now he was a killing machine. While the guards worked, I practiced cavalry combat, charging corpses on horseback with a lance. Ashina rode alongside me on her wolf, coaching my technique. "Don't slow down when you engage," she said. "Either hit them with full force or don't engage at all. A cavalryman who stops moving in an infantry crowd is a dead man." Wildcat reported back. They'd found the stone bridge to the lumber yard, but they'd also heard cries for help from across the river. "Save me," and no, faint voices from inside the fog. I checked my map. The far bank was packed with skull icons. Ashina sniffed the air and detected no living creatures. Whatever was making those sounds wasn't human, at least not anymore. "You made the right call not investigating," I told Wildcat. "In the north, you can never be too careful." I sent Ashina ahead to clear a path to the lumber yard. She rode her wolf to the stone bridge, which was completely choked with corrupted water plants. The wolf blasted blue fire across the surface, burning everything away and turning the gray lake temporarily blue. From the bridge, Ashina spotted what looked like a piece of driftwood with a purple magical flower growing on it. She jumped to the riverbank and reached for it with her spear. The driftwood exploded upward. It was a second-rank corrupted crocodile, 6 or 7 meters long, hiding underwater to mask its scent. Its jaws snapped open, lined with rows of fangs. The dragon wolf dodged effortlessly. The crocodile slammed head first into the bank, then whipped its massive tail around with enough force to crater the riverbed and send waves across the lake. Ashina appeared behind it like a ghost. One thrust of her spear punched clean through its body. Before it could react, she landed on its head and brought her blade down with divine power, splitting its skull open. Brain matter and blood splattered everywhere. Corrupted fish with legs and hands crawled out of the water to lick up the blood. The dragon wolf jumped into the lake, dragged the crocodile carcass ashore, and torched every living thing in sight. "Too bad it's corrupted," Ashina sighed, poking the enormous carcass. "If it were a normal beast, we could eat it. But the hide might be useful." She plucked the magical purple flower from its back. At least that was worth something. "What does this magic plant do?" I asked, craning my neck to look without touching it. I'd learned my lesson from the last incident. Ashina immediately sealed it in a jar. "Don't smell it. Don't stare at it. What if you get poisoned again?" She was still traumatized by my involuntary behavior with the aphrodisiac plant. I told her she was being overcautious, but honestly, fair enough. We needed a herbalist to identify these things. For now, we'd just keep it alive. Then that creepy voice echoed from the fog again. "Save me," a woman's desperate scream, like someone burning alive. Ashina's ears twitched. The sound was coming from the lumber yard direction, but she detected no living creatures. If someone's been screaming for help this long without dying, either they're perfectly fine or it's a monster mimicking human speech, I said, drawing my sword. Everyone stay alert. Ashina charged ahead into the fog. Within seconds, she found the lumber yard, and a massive horde of corpses crowding against the building walls, drawn by the screaming inside. The thick walls were groaning under the pressure. But she also spotted something that made her grin. Huge stockpiles of lumber surrounding the building, mostly intact. Wood, the one thing we desperately needed for construction and defensive walls. This lumber yard had once supplied both the estate and Starite City, using the river to float logs downstream. Something lashed out at her from the side, a spiked tail, lightning fast. Any normal person would have been killed. Ashina just tilted her head and let it whistle past her hair, then drove her spear through the attacker's throat. A first-rank corrupted creature, dead before it hit the ground. She couldn't use fire here without burning the precious lumber. So she had her dragon wolf howl to attract every corpse in the area, then lured them away to open ground where the wolf could safely incinerate them in batches. Clever girl. By the time the slaves finished skinning the crocodile, Ashina had cleared the entire lumber yard. All done, she reported. The buildings are intact, and there's lots of wood. I pumped my fist. Brilliant work. She stopped me before I could rush over, her cheeks slightly pink. Wait, I need a favor. My head's dizzy from all the fighting. I need head pats to recover. She'd gotten completely conditioned by my habit of rubbing her head after every battle. Pure Pavlovian response. I couldn't resist. I immediately reached up and started patting. Her tail went crazy. Mission accomplished. We entered the lumber yard and found 3 buildings. A wood processing workshop, a storage warehouse, and worker housing. Good. This was exactly what we needed. Save me. The scream blasted from inside the worker housing. Everyone jumped. The door was wide open. Inside, overturned furniture, scattered body parts, and absolutely nothing alive. Just cold, dark emptiness with a faint, eerie wind blowing through. Evil spirits, my guards shouted, freezing in their tracks. These men who'd charge headfirst into corpse hordes were suddenly rooted to the spot with fear. The slaves were even worse. Several wet themselves on the spot. If I hadn't been standing right there, they'd have scattered in every direction. Fighting monsters you can stab is one thing. A disembodied voice screaming from an empty room? That's a completely different kind of terror. This was a deeply superstitious era. My soldiers could charge into corpse hordes without blinking, but a disembodied voice screaming from an empty building? That had them frozen stiff. I checked my map, nothing alive inside. Ashina confirmed no living creatures either, but insisted on going first. She figured the sound was coming from underground based on how hollow and echoing it was. Smart observation. She crept inside with her blade raised. Near a wall corner, she found a wool carpet covering the floor, strange for a lumberjack's house. Under it was a trapdoor with a pull ring. She yanked it open and a wave of blood stench hit her, so hard even she gagged. Her eyes went wide and she leaped back instantly, divine power flooding her blade. We all braced for something to come charging out. Nothing came. After 30 seconds of tense silence, Ashina peeked back down and relaxed. It's a magic recording device, she said. The magical signature was too faint for me to detect earlier. That's what's been making the screaming. Several slaves collapsed from relief. I wiped my own cold sweat. I told Wildcat to guard the slaves outside while Ashina and I went down. The basement nearly broke me. The room was packed with human remains. 5 young women, only upper bodies remaining, were nailed naked to the walls, gutted, their dried intestines crawling with corrupted worms. Blood from every direction flowed into the center of the floor, forming a ritual magic circle. In the center lay another girl, dead at least 3 years, almost merged with the floor. Her nun's robes identified her as church clergy. The recording stone kept playing on loop. A terrified girl in white screaming, "Save me," before a shadowy figure cut off her limbs and inserted some kind of worm into her body. Then blood mist, writhing tentacles, chanting and screaming. Loop. Repeat. Combined with the hellish scene around us, it was the most horrifying thing I'd ever witnessed across 2 lifetimes. Ashina recovered faster than me. She was a god-chosen, she said matter-of-factly. Someone had been hunting and ritually murdering church god-chosen. I speculated it might be the Empress trying to break free from the church's influence, or maybe a rival kingdom stirring trouble. But honestly, imperial politics had nothing to do with me right now. Ashina walked over to the central corpse and removed a silver brooch, exquisitely crafted beyond anything modern machinery could produce, glowing with soft silver light. The instant she lifted it, the recording stone stopped and the screaming finally ceased. Despite sitting in a blood-soaked basement surrounded by corpses for years, the brooch was completely clean. Not a speck of filth on it. "This is a first-rank divine artifact," Ashina said casually. "It's powered by divine energy. That's why I couldn't sense the recording stone separately. A divine artifact. Like the legendary rose lance my family owned. These are weapons left behind when God-chosen die, crystallizing their soul and divine power." I was ecstatic. This single brooch was worth more than everything I'd looted so far combined. But I noticed Ashina looking slightly jealous. She had her dragon wolf as a divine gift, but no artifact of her own. "I don't need to pet the wolf," I said, grinning. "Petting you is better." I gave her a thorough head-patting session. Her tail went into overdrive. Crisis of jealousy averted. Ashina pretended to be mad about the head-patting, threatening to bite me next time. Sure, very scary. But I was over the moon. A divine artifact. These things are rarer than rare. God-chosen are already scarcer than pandas, and artifacts only appear when one dies. The Empire once auctioned a first-rank artifact with a starting price of 1 million gold coins. Every artifact is strictly controlled by nations and noble families. They almost never appear on the open market. "This must be one of the artifacts Eliza mentioned were lost in the north," I said gleefully. She wouldn't tell me if any were in Nightfall Domain. Well, finders keepers. Imperial law says everything on a lord's territory belongs to the lord. I slapped a "Made in Nightfall Domain" label on it without a shred of guilt. The church? Never heard of them. This brooch grew from the soil. Ancient family heirloom. Always been ours. Ashina tried it, but couldn't use it. It was a holy light artifact that clashed with her winter goddess powers. She told me to claim it by dripping blood on it. The moment my blood touched the brooch, holy light flooded into my body. It felt warm, familiar, comfortable. The artifact bonded to me like an extension of my own hands. My lord panel updated with the details. Divine artifact, silver iris brooch, first rank, source, holy light goddess passive. Wearer can freely change their appearance, body shape, and voice, illusion. Only, doesn't alter actual physical form. Active, transform brooch into silver iris longsword. First rank, special effects only available to holy light God-chosen. I started laughing like a maniac. Change my appearance at will? I could become anyone. The disguise possibilities were endless. Infiltration, espionage, impersonation. I could walk into my stepmother's bedroom looking like my own father. I immediately tested it by transforming into Ashina's appearance. She nearly screamed, staring at a perfect copy of herself. I reached for the illusory chest area. Nothing there, of course. Pure visual trick. Ashina was not amused. "I can't smell any difference in your body," she confirmed after sniffing me. "Heart rate and scent are unchanged. It only fools the eyes. Be careful of anyone who relies on smell. Good to know? Not perfect, but incredibly useful." I activated the sword form next, a gorgeous silver blade that hummed with intelligence. Unfortunately, its full power was locked to holy light God-chosen only. Based on the abilities, disguise plus hidden weapon, the original owner was probably an assassin-type God-chosen. Cool backstory. I took the recording stone too. The murdered nun's death might not be as simple as it looked. That footage could be valuable leverage someday. I had Ashina sketch the ritual circle from the floor. It gave us both a deeply uneasy feeling. Back outside, Wildcat reported that the lumber was enormous, tree trunks thicker than his waist. We didn't have enough people to haul the big logs, so I told him to grab the smaller planks for now, and we'd come back for the rest. I also ordered the girls' bodies in the basement to be buried properly. I'd taken their God-chosen's artifact. The least I could do was give them a decent resting place. Then I opened my map to plan a transport route from the lumber yard back to base. That's when I saw it, a crimson red dot, prowling along the edge of my territory. What the hell is that? I remembered that red dot. When I first arrived at the estate, something in the main building's basement had stared at me, a cold, suffocating presence I'd never forgotten. On my map, it had always been a stationary red dot deep underground. I'd planned to deal with it eventually, after getting stronger. Now that red dot was at my territory's border. It had moved, and it brought company. A swarm of skull icons appeared out of nowhere on my map. 1 minute, everything was clear. The next, the area around my base was crawling with enemies. That thing escaped. I broke out in cold sweat and called Ashina immediately. She jumped out of the basement the instant I said her name. I was already scanning for threats. Get back to the territory and protect everyone, I told her quietly. Fight if you can win. If not, fall back to the winery. If that's not enough, retreat completely. Don't be a hero. Without you, we're all dead. She nodded grimly, mounted her dragon wolf, and launched toward the base like a black missile, smashing through every corrupted obstacle in her path. I gathered Wildcat and the guards and ordered a forced march back. We abandoned the lumber carts. Lives first. Back at the winery, the warning horn sounded for the first time since the Beastman invasion 10 years ago. Slaves panicked instantly, dropping tools and stampeding toward the stone building. Screaming, crying, cursing, total chaos. Tate cracked his whip, trying to maintain some order. When he yelled that, monsters are still far away, it only confirmed everyone's worst fear and made them run harder. Thank God I'd followed Ashina's advice and kept the slaves working near the winery instead of sending them to expand the perimeter. They all reached the building quickly. The winery's massive marble construction was basically a fortress, exactly why I'd chosen it as our base. Chow was upstairs, furious that dirty slaves were tracking mud on his clean floors. Some things never change. Meanwhile, 20 guards were running toward the danger instead of away from it. Iron Hammer spat on his hands, polished his favorite spiked mace, and grinned. I'm only 9 silver coins away from freedom. After that, I'm going to drink myself stupid and visit Maple City's finest ladies. Better survive first. His buddy laughed, armor clanking as he ran. When they reached the perimeter, the situation was bad. Massive numbers of corpses were pouring into the territory, smashing through our farm equipment, charging straight at the winery. Some were being picked off by arrows, coming from one of our small wooden forts. These forts were my invention, simple circles of chest-high wooden stakes driven into the ground, braced with triangular supports. Not walls, more like sheep pens. But they forced corpses into narrow attack lanes where a handful of guards could stab through the gaps endlessly. I'd built them as training exercises for the soldiers. Now they were saving lives. A guard nicknamed Sheep Dung was inside one fort, mechanically thrusting his halberd through the gaps, pulling back chunks of flesh with every stroke. Other guards were loading crossbows and shooting corpses that tried climbing over. Follow me. We're reinforcing Sheep Dung, Iron Hammer roared. The corpses spotted the armored squad and surged toward them. One corpse with a grotesquely oversized right arm sprinted ahead of the pack, either a supernatural creature or something extremely dangerous. This was the real test. Whatever that red dot was, it had brought an army.